across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
To coin a phrase, we're a little chock-a-block at this end. A very busy show. Good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Back tomorrow. No, she's not, is she? She's back on Monday, right here on Talk. Coming up this afternoon, we are going to be talking the story, as you will be aware, of the Met Police facing fresh criticism after reports revealed, and this is astonishing, that rapists and violent offenders were hired as officers when full vetting checks were dropped in a rush to boost diversity and recruitment. Seriously, we'll come to that in a couple of moments. Rupert Lowe will join us to discuss a little later too. Also this afternoon, Kemi Badenoch has pledged to abolish business rates for thousands of pubs, alongside cutting average energy bills by more than £1,000 under a cheap power plan that rolls back green rules. What are you making of that? Do you trust the Tories to get this one right? After all, they were previously in charge half an hour ago. And Labour is set to raise fuel duty from September, ending the long-frozen 5p cut and triggering pressure on Keir Starmer to rethink as motorists face higher pump prices. This is the guy who for the last 2 weeks has been running around the place saying, you're going to start to notice the difference in 2026. Yeah, it's going to pound in your pocket, get in the bin, Keir. You don't know what you're talking about, mate. We'll have more on that as well. Here's the deal. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news. You want to drop us a message, a voice note or a call, 0344 499 1000. Do you still trust the police? And I ask this question really in the spirit of not just the story we're about to talk about, but just generally. There's been quite a lot of negative headlines about the police. Some of them, of course, even the police take incredibly seriously. If there is a wrong 'un in the police, I promise you, the average copper wants to get them out more than anyone else. But of course, a lot of stereotyping and generalising goes on. You know, bad apples exist in all industries. We know that. Fundamentally, do you still trust the police? And when I look at this story, we often talk about the obsession with DEI and diversity hiring. The government and the corporate world utterly obsessed with ticking every box and making sure that every workplace, department and team is 100% represented by every single background, religion, colour or gender. Unless, of course, you're a working class white boy, it gets a little bit tricky. Of course, in addition to all of that, these places treat it like a religion. I mean, it's not just a case of ticking some boxes. This is at the top of the to-do list. Everything else gets relegated. We've got to forget qualifications or the right person for the job. Just hire lots of folk who look or identify differently from each other, and everything will be fantastic, and we'll be picking up an award by noon. That's how it seems to work. DE hires, the diversity police are everywhere in this country, have not gone away, including literally in the police, and with devastating results. And today we hear that the Met Police, and listen to some of this, we've not heard these stories before, they are deeply disturbing. The Met Police hired officers with failed background checks in order to boost diversity, including a man who was accused of raping a child. So more than 100 applicants that were initially failed in the vetting procedure. They went through the usual procedure. Everyone else has gone through the same procedure. They went through it. They were failed. They were later allowed to join the police after their cases were then referred to a special panel. So people who'd failed, if they were a person of colour or some other diversity box they had ticked, they were then looked at again, a special panel. So what did that special panel look like? Set up to scrutinise rejected applications from ethnic minority candidates in order to help the police meet diversity targets. Have you ever heard anything more outrageous than this? And they included this case, PC Cliff Mitchell, who was recruited despite having been accused of raping a child. His application was initially rejected, but this decision was then overturned. He was later convicted of 13 counts of rape including 6 against a child. He's now serving a life sentence. But his application was overturned. And that looks like exactly the kind of guy we want. No, it looks like exactly the kind of guy you really don't want. He was among 25 officers given a second chance who went on to commit criminal offences of misconduct, including violent, sexual and drug use as well. Vetting is supposed to weed out, of course, those with convictions, cautions or criminal associations, or where there are red flags around their integrity or their character. But in a desperate bid to boost officer numbers and diversity and hit unrealistic diversity targets set out by Dame Cressida Dick, remember her, the previous Met Commissioner, senior figures in the force were allowed recruitment standards to fall. I mean, I am utterly, it's jaw-dropping stuff. 0344 499 1000. And by the way, when you look at the Met, I mean, it's a fairly diverse outfit anyway. I don't think they are left wanting. But of course, if you're trying to marry up every single number as a percentage with every single, so we have to have an exact replication of the amount of Muslims or Sikhs or Jews, black people, brown people. But where does that list stop? 0344 499 1000. So do you still trust the police? There is the question. And of course, if you do, I'm all ears this end. If you don't, then let us know. Our lines are open. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We'll take calls on that. 87222 if you're sending us in a message. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Pete Barnes is with us. Pete, good afternoon to you.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing? I do apologise, you were slightly late coming in. Yes, not your fault. So what have we got here? The police and diversity.
Yes.
We've been in this place before, haven't we, when it comes to diversity targets? And of course, we can laugh about it and we can say, look, yeah, isn't this a bit strange? You know, they're recruiting people not based on their ability or their qualifications, but just based on the fact they're just ticking a box. When it comes to the police, and you're recruiting people who either have known or suspicions of malfeasance or criminality, we're in a whole different place now.
Yeah, we are. What's really important to remember in this story is it's 2 bits. First of all, there is the fact that the police didn't do the paperwork. They chose to look the other way, and the accountability crisis that we have in this country. You then have the diversity aspect and the fact that we seem to give preferential treatment, a two-tier society, to certain groups and not to others. So this story is really a kind of a compounding of the mess that we find ourselves in, because nobody gets fired. Well, that's always been my thing. I've sat in this studio so many times screaming, why do they still have a job? What I really hate is when people hide behind institutions. All an institution is an address and a letterhead. Yeah. It's people. Who made this decision? Who overturned that police officer's refusal for him not to be one? Who did that? Who made that call? That's what the public needs to know, and that's who needs to be fired and replaced, because that's the only way we ever change any of this.
And of course, I mean to say it's dangerous, doesn't even touch the sides. Wayne Couzens is, of course, perhaps the most high-profile example where there were red flags, perhaps not in the very initial interview, but certainly as it was established that this man had joined the Met, it was quite clear he was wrong, and he had nicknames that...
I mean, the nickname should have been the biggest red flag.
Was he known as the rapist?
Yes, he was, yeah.
I mean, it's not really, if you're known as the rapist in the office and you're in the old bill, then somebody should go, maybe this bloke shouldn't be here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have red flags that are basically, do you know those people that wave planes down? Do you know, the semaphore people? That's what we had, and they chose to look the other way. That's the really key bit here. They chose to look the other way to meet a diversity target or any kind of target in general. That's unacceptable, because what they gave to this person was a warrant card. The right to intrude on you as a person, as a citizen, and to intrude on your house, your personal life and all the rest of it. That is beyond ridiculous. What I found rather strange was Shabana Mahmood saying, we need an investigation by the people who can't investigate.
Yes.
Yes. Have you noticed the complete...
There's the problem. The trouble with these stories is that it does obviously give the police in general a terrible name, and then, of course, you look at the Panorama programme that went out, you look at Charing Cross Police Station and WhatsApp groups. But, I mean, it has to be stated that this is I mean, obviously the police are set to the bar is set higher, and rightly so. The police themselves acknowledge that the bar should be higher in standards for them.
On that bit, Ian, I'm going to disagree with you, because the people setting the standard, the chiefs of police, need to all go in this country. And I've said it from day one.
Yep.
The problem is the people setting the standard are the ones looking the other way. They set the standard. And if they're the ones that have climbed the ranks through all this stuff, have seen it across their desks, they know about it, and have chosen not to act on it, here's a little box and a pink slip, off you go.
Yep.
We'll find somebody who actually wants to police the nation and bring law and order back. Until we actually get rid of those people, I'm afraid we're stuck with the honest Bobby on the beach trying to do the best they can, but it is their superiors that are the problem. We can blame the government for this for as much as we like, but the police themselves have to take accountability and start, firing people.
Well, it's interesting that these targets were set by Dame Cressida Dick, and I would ask this question. If you are the Commissioner of the Met Police, how have you even got time to go, right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Top of my to-do list is getting the diversity hire thing in place. I mean, how would that even get, come back in, 2087 or something, and you might have some time on your hands. But the idea that this became a priority, so much so that people who were interviewed for the job and refused the job, the panel looked at them, they went, this person is not right. They were either just not very good in the interview, or there were some worrying flags around them. Those people were then sifted into another decision-making process, which wanted all the ethnic minority candidates that had been refused a job, just that one group, to look at again. And from that, people like PC Cliff Mitchell were selected. A man who went on to rape 13 times, 6 times against a child.
It's disgusting, but it happens because people like Cressida Dick put priority of it. So that's the big problem. When you have certain resources, a certain amount of time, you are judged by how you allocate those resources and time. And it's very clear that she did not have the priorities of the British public, and most importantly, safety of the British public at heart, because I'm sick to death of having to sit here talking about the number of times that the safety of this nation is put at risk, whether it be internationally by geopolitics or whether it be things like the migrant crisis. We have so much evidence to prove that the migrant crisis is a threat to the safety of the United Kingdom, and nothing happens. We put people we don't know next to a school and everybody acts surprised every time something terrible happens. How many times do we have to sit here and talk about this before somebody says it's got to stop? And, how many 14-year-old girls have to be sexually assaulted behind the back of a pub? How many more police officers get these special treatments? It's got to stop. And it's the only way is accountability and holding standards and not bending them.
I mean, the standards have got to be, the standards have got to be absolutely up there, up there. But of course, it is fair to say this is not the story of the average copper.
No, it's not.
But that's becoming an increasingly difficult sell. I was chairing the Police Federation conference at the tail end of last year, and every face you bump into, everyone is aware of all of these stories. We're talking about diligent professional officers who want to get the job. They want these people out of the police as well. But as a result of this small but massively significant group, there is that kind of tarring everyone with the same brush.
It didn't really help when they started taking the knee in front of a mob, when they start dancing at Notting Hill Carnival, when they start driving around in rainbow cars.
All of that has got to stop.
It's got to stop. But what I will say, and I've listened to quite a bit of talk on this, is we can't overcorrect the overcorrection. We can't go back to the 1980s where certain communities were either ignored or were harassed unfairly by the police. We can't go back to the good old days because they weren't good for everybody. We have to find the actual nuanced position. And my big fear is too many people will start screaming, oh, we need to go back to the 1960s and this kind of thing. No, we don't, because there's a lot of people that have a big problem with that period, and they're not unjustified complaints. Again, it's about finding that actual common sense ground. I know that's a phrase that we only use in this building, but it is hilarious to me that yet again we have to have the conversation as to why is nobody getting fired? Because people make decisions, not institutions.
Do you still trust the police? There is the question, 0344 499 1000. We'll take voice notes on that as well as calls. If you want to message us, that's the number. And of course, you can send a conventional message, 87222. We're going to be back talking Kemi Badenoch, who's going to save the British pub, so she says, and the British forces that helped the US capture that iffy Russian tanker. What the hell was going on the high seas yesterday? This is Talk.
TV drama on Channel 5 on Sun Investigation. Look Who's Hugh. Martin Clunes playing disgraced BBC pedo Hugh Edwards, the man that announced the Queen's death. It was the voice of the news. I'm going to try and be as calm as possible because I want your take. I think it is an absolute disgrace that pedo is walking the streets getting £200,000 a year. I cannot believe the BBC are so goddamn incompetent. I'm paying my licence fee so that pervert can live comfortably. It does my head in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Peter Barnes is with us, 1:20. Let's talk about pubs. Kemi Badenoch has pledged to abolish business rates for thousands of pubs, along with cutting average energy bills by more than £1,000 under cheap power plan that rolls back green rules. Of course, lots going on in the industry. Let's have a listen to Kemi Badenoch holding Keir Starmer to account.
Prime Minister gave his word that he would help pubs. Yet they face a 15% rise in business rates because of his budget. Will the Prime Minister be honest and admit his taxes are forcing pubs to close?
Now, it's interesting, an interesting bit of timing. Literally in the last couple of minutes, the news has just broken that the government is poised to announce a climb down on the forthcoming increases to business rates. So,
guess you get to take a victory lap.
Have they shot her fox in this respect? I mean,
no, I think in the other way. I think the Conservatives get to run around saying, look what we got to do.
Well, that's how they need to sell this.
Yeah, because what's really important, Camilla Tomney asked Nigel Farage at a press conference, how are they going to say, how is Reform UK going to save the pub? All we got was, pubs are really important. I've always thought pubs are a parliament. We didn't get detail. The difference that the Conservatives have really got now is they come at it with policy, detail, costed.
Yeah.
That's what the public need now, because we've tried vibes and we've tried, promises and, just believe a bit more, but now we need a plan. And the Conservatives have learned that the economy is how they get back into the public sphere, and these kind of things are really important, because Kemi is right. The Labour Party do not understand that pubs aren't just a business. They're not restaurants or bars. They are a community centre for so many people and so many communities, particularly rural ones, which is what Kemi and the Conservatives have really gone after. I do think this is a very smart policy because it's two ends. First, it's the business rates, and you then have the cheap energy plan. I think it's a good way to bring the two together. However, one thing I do note, there is absolutely no reference of removing the Climate Change Act, which is basically the ECHR of the net zero world. If you don't pull that back, none of it matters. Absolutely, because that's
Keir Starmer spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks, including his New Year's Eve message, where he kind of stood up and was going, look, I know it's been tough, guys, but we've turned the corner. And I thought, when he said, I thought,
we're on a roundabout.
What story are you referencing? When did this corner get turned? 2026, more money in your pocket, you'll realise we're here on your side.
I said the other day that, for Keir, things can only get better. No, it can't.
It can't.
It really can't.
It really can't. But of course, that's the line he was trying to sell. This was meant to be, and he's had quite a few resets. For a bloke that's only been in power for half an hour.
This was phase 2, apparently.
Yeah, this is phase 2.7 or something. But nonetheless, that was what he was trying to say. And of course, he will... how many things can they row back? So the winter fuel thing, they had to row back on. The farmers, they're rowing back on. Now we've got this, they're rowing back on. They've really... Everything they touch
because it
turns to the...
Yeah, definitely.
Chisel.
It's the opposite of the Midas touch, as somebody once put it to me. But they didn't say it that nicely. But what I will say is, it's interesting because the problem is there is a lack of impact assessment. They just move ahead. Everything that they've had to kind of water down, I say it's not a U-turn, it's watering down, because they don't reverse anything. So they just water it down. And what it is because they don't actually think longer than that spreadsheet. So everything they do is so immediate because they don't have the business acumen to go, well, we need to think about tomorrow, not just this afternoon. And it's that mentality that they are falling down with on policy at every single turn, because it's about, we've just got to get through the next 10 minutes. Because nobody's in charge.
The other area as well, just to move on to this other story, and I find this rather curious, the getting rid of jury trials, which has been hugely contentious.
Also, another instance of no impact assessment.
No impact assessment whatsoever. Did you realise we had a courts minister?
Yes, Sarah Sackman.
Sarah Sackman, who should perhaps be Sackmaned herself.
Yes.
Sarah Sackman has defended Labour's plans to limit jury trials, saying that the system is being abused by criminals and reform is needed, regardless of the record backlog. So what she's saying here is that they would have done this even if there wasn't a backlog, that criminals are using it for, for ill purposes, which is an extraordinary, very casual way to kind of dismantle the entirety of something that's been there for hundreds of years, to dismantle the court system based on the fact that you think Bob in Arbroath is using it to try and get off his parking
Exactly.
ticket.
I always say, at least in Kafka's trial, they got a trial. The problem here, is yet again, Sarah Sackman is not the sharpest tool in the shed, and nobody is giving message orientation, so everybody's just shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
Sarah Sackman, though, has had a more problematic thing that everybody rather glossed over, and she said that we should tolerate Sharia courts for the sake of equality. That was our courts minister. This woman...
These are the kind of idiots that are in government,
Well, this is the point, is whilst we fuss over people like Shabana Mahmood, it's the next level. The ministers that do the legwork.
Who votes for these people?
Oh, unfortunately, they do walk among us.
They walk among us, and in their own constituent, thousands of people went to the ballot box and went, they're really good, old
Not that many. I think that's the thing we always have to remember, is that not that many people actually voted for this government.
Well, as distinct, in terms of a share.
Of course, yeah.
But, there would probably still be 14,000 people that thought Sackman knew what she was talking about.
Yeah, on the issue of the jury trials, it just shows that all the narrative about putting victims first and all this kind of stuff was nonsense. This was ideological, as always, because I think it goes to the heart of the left. They don't trust us anymore. You don't make the right decision. We're going to take away that decision ability from you. Yeah. That's what it is. The judges know best because the judges are our people. That's what I think is at the heart of this. It's nothing to do with the system and the backlog and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's, yet again, your individual right to information or decision making has been pulled away for saving time and money. Is the excuse, and I think that is terrifying.
Have a listen to this. Different story. If you're 16 years old now, you'll be eligible to vote in 2029.
That's not a thing.
That's
a terrifying concept.
That's a terrifying concept. 1.7 million 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to vote in 2029, but new research suggests most children are unaware it says here, unaware of the change and lack basic civic knowledge. It's not really a change, is it?
No, it's not a change. I think this is polite.
But the point is, if you're 16 now, you shouldn't be... At 16, you should be either playing Fortnite, picking spots, or looking for that unachievable date on some kind of app. Not worrying about, I'm going to the ballot box in 2.5 years. Yeah. How exciting.
Yeah, you're perfectly right. But people aren't going to like me for this opinion. However, it wasn't 16-year-olds that ballooned the welfare state. It wasn't 16-year-olds that, made it so bad that you got a free car and an emotional support llama because you had a bad day. It's not the 16-year-olds that gave Tony Blair 3 successive super majorities. At some point, we have to stop blaming young people for decisions they've yet to make. I've always been in favour of increasing the voting age and not lowering it, but we do have to take accountability for everybody to get involved in our democracy. More so now than ever, because a lot of this stuff has collapsed because nobody paid attention long enough, and more people voted in the Love Island final than actually voted in a general election one time.
Yeah.
We went from after the Second World War, the first general election had an 82% turnout. This was a country that was broke. We had a generation loss and all the rest of it. Most people now can't be bothered to get up off the sofa. There is a consequence to that, and it's called Keir Starmer.
What should the age of voting? Because I would say the age of voting should be 45.
I don't know. I think scientifically, I think it's like 25, isn't it? When you're
here's what I'd do, Pete. I'd make you certainly wouldn't be able to become a police officer till you were 30. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to have sex until you're 37. You couldn't vote till you're 45. Yeah. This is the kind of way
you can't become US president until you're 45. And I think that's a good standard. Although I use the Winston Churchill...
It's a good point, actually.
Yeah, I use the Winston Churchill quote, the greatest argument against democracy is 5 minutes with the average voter. So at the moment, I'm not in favour of democracy.
There is that as well.
I do think this is a big problem, though, when we talk about how we actually educate young people into politics, because I don't trust teachers, because I can see the Daily Mail headline and I can see the Guardian headline already. One's teaching about Margaret Thatcher is a saint, the other's teaching that, Chairman Mao was actually terrible, and all this kind of stuff. It's just an accident, it's a mess waiting to happen. But I do think, yet again, we have to kind of start doing things for ourselves and not be spoon-fed. Yeah. I always say that the creation of the nanny state and the NHS was actually the downfall of this country, because everything got handed to us then, and we didn't do the lead work anymore.
I was talking to my 11-year-old, soon-to-be 12-year-old. This was just before Christmas, and he just suddenly dropped into something in conversation I overheard. He mentioned Margaret Thatcher, and to hear the name Margaret Thatcher come out of his lips, it was like I said, what? Sorry, what's the deal with?
Yeah,
he
I'll
said,
put the newspaper down.
Yes. Well, what's the deal with Margaret? He said, we did a bit about her in history.
Oh, dangerous.
And he said she was good and bad, wasn't she? And I said no, she was only good.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of re-education there.
Good. There's nothing better than the word re-education.
You've got to. He said she took away all the milk, didn't she? And then I reminded him, it's a factoid, I'm going to wheel this out until I go to my grave. The factoid you need to know, 2 words. When somebody say, Thatcher, the milk snatcher, just mention the name Ted Short. Most people go, who's Ted Short? Ted Short was the previous Labour Education Secretary, who also took away milk from schools. But of course, Ted Short doesn't rhyme with anything.
That's true.
So they couldn't. Well, it rhymes with something.
Yeah,
but,
something.
But it doesn't rhyme with anything that you can squeeze in theft from children.
Yes, that's true.
But so he got away with it. No one said a word when Shorty did it.
Yeah, it's like Margaret Thatcher closed all the mines. Technically, most of them were closed by the time she came into power.
Correct.
You know, it's just one of those things where
but for different reasons. Different reasons.
That wasn't real socialism. That's my favourite one. Yeah. You know, when all the people die, that's never the real one.
Exactly. Pete, we've hit the clock.
Yeah.
Time goes very
Always,
fast.
always.
Peter Barnes with us on the programme. We will speak very soon. It's a month since we saw you last,
it is,
isn't it? It doesn't seem
well,
like
since
that.
we saw each other, I've been here, you've not been here.
I've not been here. Well, I've been here, but you've not been here. So there you go. You want to get in touch? We are any of the subjects we've just talked about there, plus that big question. Do you still, with all the stories that have gone around about the police in the last sort of couple of years in particular, including this disturbing one today out of the Met, do you still trust British policing and the police officers concerned? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Becky says, I'm really sorry, but Peter Barnes is incorrect about the Conservatives scrapping the business rates policy, the scrapping stamp duty policy, and more have absolutely no costing behind them. If we did, we'd know the details. The problem the Conservatives have is that Kemi Badenoch is not a strong leader and that no one trusts them. I certainly don't trust her or any of the Liberal Democrats in Conservative clothing. The party is full of them. People want change from the mainstream parties, so really, by his own comparison, the fact that there is no detail or costing to Kemi's policies, they are equally as bad as he thinks the Reform Party are. So people don't trust the Tories. And after being a lifelong Conservative, I'm sure don't, because they don't represent me anymore. People are willing to wait for the meat on the bones of other parties' policies whilst they work to get that. Peter sadly needs to get his head around the fact that two-party politics is gone for good. That last point is certainly true. I think what tends to happen in opposition, whether you are Reform, whether you are the Tories, Lib Dems or anyone else for that matter, you are in the slightly luxurious position of being able to make bold announcements without being fully compelled to cost them at that point. I mean, sometimes you'll get a scintilla of detail, but I think Becky is quite right. Very easy to go. I mean, if you look at the list of things that are going to be abolished under Kemi Badenoch, and Becky's mentioned the two big ones there, which is stamp duty, and now we're hearing about business rates on pubs. Is that all business rates or something? That would be extraordinary, wouldn't it? Whatever it happens to be. We'll take your calls and comments on that. 0344 499 1000. This one comes in from Joanna in Salisbury. It's not the criminals that are using the justice system. It's people with hurty words that were tried by a jury and were found not guilty. Yeah, most of the people that went to jail didn't have a jury trial because they pleaded guilty. That's a whole other issue. Let's go back to this one, though. The Met Police facing fresh criticism after reports revealed that rapists and violent offenders were hired as officers when full vetting checks were dropped in a rush to boost recruitment and diversity. In one case, a child rape suspect was taken on after initial vetting concerns were then overturned by this special panel, reportedly as part of a drive to meet diversity targets. The revelations have raised serious questions about public safety and standards inside the Met. Let's have a reminder of what the BBC found when they went undercover with the Met Police.
Independent review concluded the Met was institutionally homophobic, misogynistic and racist. Panorama went undercover to find out if it had changed after whistleblowers provided evidence about Charing Cross.
Ring the buzzer if you need anything else, sir.
Our reporter Rory Bibb worked for 7 months at Charing Cross in a civilian role as a designated detention officer. He filmed evidence of racist attitudes and what appeared to be the mistreatment of people who'd been arrested.
It's interesting because and this may not be a popular view, I wasn't that enamoured with the Panorama programme for a whole load of reasons, which would probably take me half an hour to go over. But it does sort of highlight that our police service, as it is now called, is under scrutiny. But this story of trying to tick diversity boxes at the expense of criminality and goodness knows what else going on. A child rapist was hired, for God's sake. Let's speak with Rupert Lowe MP, independent MP and leader of Restore Britain. Rupert, good afternoon to you. I mean, part of me isn't surprised about this. Does that sound strange?
Good afternoon, Ian, and Happy New Year. I haven't spoken to you since the New Year. Well, I think anything which comes under the auspices of Sadiq Khan has to be looked at very closely, and I've had experience of this myself because, as you know, Reform made 2 palpably false witness statements against me, which the police took seriously. They came and took my guns away, and I had to go to a voluntary interview at Hammersmith Police Station. And you know, at the end of the day, they haven't prosecuted the people who made the false witness statements, but they have dropped everything I was accused of. There was no evidence of it. And yet, you know, today we've heard from the police that somebody who said after a social media post for the new year that they hoped in response to that I would be Charlie Kirked, and then deleted their account. They've decided they're not going to take that any further. So, I mean, there is palpable evidence of somebody trying to incite damage and hurt and death to an MP, for goodness sake. They do nothing about it. And then they send, you know, the police send Lucy Connolly to prison, or the judiciary do, for a ill-advised social media post which she deleted. So I think there's so much wrong with our police, so much wrong with our judiciary. With regard to your story, I mean, it's quite staggering that this nonsensical diversity rubbish has been allowed to put people's lives at risk. Now, as we know, if you get the wrong people in a position as a police officer, that's a position of trust. You're a public servant. We've seen what happens, obviously, with Wayne Couzens. We saw what happened tragically to Sarah Everard. We've had this character, Carrick, who's another one. And to hear that the Met admits that for diversity reasons, and again, I was reading in the article, there's a panel.
Yes, a special panel.
I'd like to know the names of the people. I think they should all be outed. Yep. The names of the people on that panel. I see there were some senior police officers, but I'd like to know who else is on that panel, who picked that panel, and how they could make such bad decisions. Because in the end, it's all very well to say, oh, I'm sorry, but when somebody's been raped and killed, as in the case of Sarah Everard, it's rather too late to be apologizing. And, you know, I think people who make such elementary errors as this in a position where they're supposed to be serving the public, I think there've got to be criminal charges against them, Ian. I think people have got to start to be held to account. As far as actually hiring loads of new police officers in order to meet budgetary targets, I mean, that's actually as bad, because you end up with a bunch of people who then go on in positions of trust to commit crimes against the public. Now, this is all under the control of Sadiq Khan, but he appears to not only deny the existence of the rape gangs in London, which we know they do exist. It's currently still happening. It has happened a lot in the past. And when he's questioned by Susan Hall in the London Assembly, he just filibusters and bullshits. And frankly, you know, he is a vile little man, in my opinion, and he does a terrible job. He's destroying London, and he's clearly not doing his job as the boss of the Metropolitan Police with Rowley reporting to him. And it does seem that there is, and I don't know what's happened or what the tipping point was in our human journey, Rupert, where suddenly these sort of DEI hirings and diversity and all sorts of strange goings on in the HR departments. And as you mentioned there, a special panel. So people who've been interviewed, the panel interviewed them, decided, actually, you know, you're not right for the job. That might have been because instinctively in the interview they didn't come across correctly, or it could be that there were some red flags. But either way, that wasn't good enough for this particular police force, because they then have this, as you said, this special panel. So there's the panel, but there's the special panel who say, all the people you rejected, out of the 100 applicants that failed that initial process, can you tell us how many were from ethnic minorities? And they say, yeah, there was 26 from ethnic minorities. OK, we'd like to reconsider all of those people. This was under the directive of, as you rightly say, Sadiq Khan's the mayor. He's essentially the Crime Commissioner of London. Cressida Dick, what an awful name to bring into the conversation, but we have to for this purposes, Rupert. She was the one that was setting out as alongside Khan and others to make sure this happened, and then rehiring the people that have been deemed not fit for purpose. I mean, you can't make that up. So let's know the names of the people on that panel. Correct. And I think you know, you should be using your good offices to ask who they are. Let's get them up there in public. I mean, I think the British people have had enough of all this diversity nonsense. What we want is people hired on merit. Yeah. It doesn't matter, you know, what your race, your colour, your religion, your sex is. Let's hire people on the basis that they can actually do the job they're being hired to do. And, you know, I'm sorry, I've had enough of it. I think the British people have had enough of it. We don't want all this woke rubbish, which means you're putting the public at risk. And I mean, you know, people, Emily Maitlis called me a racist. I couldn't care less anymore. I think the British people have had enough of it all. It's basically being used to peddle malign philosophies which are damaging Britain. And I call on everybody to stand up to it now and just call it out for what it is, palpable rubbish. Yeah. And, you know, it's time for people to stand up. They can't just continue to accept this and expect it not to affect their standard and quality of life. Indeed, Rupert, thorough stuff and strong words. Always great to have you on. Thank you, Rupert Lowe, MP, with us on the programme. He is, of course, the leader of Restore Britain too. Let's get a word on this. Chris Phillips, former head of National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, good afternoon to you. I don't know, when your career began, did these kind of departments exist? We've got to make sure, because here comes a white bloke. I mean, you were probably lucky to get the gig back then.
Yeah, well, I joined, my gosh, 40 years ago now, and I had police officers coming to visit my family, making sure I lived where I said I lived, made sure that my background was checked, and I would say the vetting was very thorough. it's been a concern for so long. In fact, I spoke to a very senior officer about 5 years ago, and his words to me was, "You wouldn't believe the type of people we're getting into the police now. The standards have dropped considerably, and we're going to all pay the penalty for this in years to come." And here we are. This is exactly what we've got. And, you know, I totally echo the views of Rupert there. And you know, who was on this panel? Let's have some names. Let's hold them accountable for basically demeaning the office of constable.
Correct. I mean, it's just, you have to almost keep reading it, thinking they have a special panel to do their best to hire the undesirables that failed the first panel. I mean, you genuinely cannot make this kind of nonsense up. I know that's a well-used phrase, but this is almost in another stratosphere, Chris. And of course, it's not just, you know, it's not the local bakery or Smith's or something where it might not matter so much. This is the police.
Yeah, and, you know, I can quite understand, actually, that people can have a bad interview. They can make, you know, say, you know, just to have a bad interview. And it's fine then to say, OK, well, let's have a look at this. We need to increase the numbers of officers, not lower the standards, but just give this person another chance to you know, to try again with the interview or whatever. I can totally get that. But when you're allowing people in with criminal records, that is a criminal offence in itself. And as I said, those people should be held responsible, and it seems that they aren't. And this is the key thing. I again would echo what Rupert said. Let's have the names out there. Let's find out who it was that made these decisions.
Yeah, spot on. Chris, great to have you on with us as ever. Thank you. Chris Phillips, former head of National Counter-Terrorism. Thank you to him. Angie says, I used to tell my daughter if she was in trouble, find a policeman. Now there are none to be found, and I don't trust the ones that do. Now I tell her to find a safe place like a shop or with an older woman. I don't trust the police to keep her safe. She's just 15. And isn't that really sad? I mean, it's not just sad, actually. That kind of underplays it a little bit. It's devastating. It's a horrendous indictment of where we are at. And when you have that breakdown of the relationship that we as citizens have with policing and the judicial system, and that's, you know, clearly creaking away for lots of other reasons. But the boys and girls in blue, I genuinely know, en masse, mostly do a fabulous job. They're absolutely up against it. What they face is, on a daily basis, is something that most of us you wouldn't get out of bed no matter how much money they paid you for. Dedicated officers in this country are worth their weight in gold. But, you know, it's by nature, and rightly so, by nature of the profession we're talking about, a couple of bad ones, a dozen or even 200 bad ones out of the tens of thousands, has a very toxic effect incredibly quickly, and it becomes quite contagious. And then you wonder who you're dealing with. And you look at the Wayne Couzens story, which is the worst of all. And then you look at, you know, some of the WhatsApp story coming out of Charing Cross Police Station. I know the Panorama Show programme was, you know, I think there's maybe much more to be said on that. But you look at this, that a panel are double checking their interview processes so they can get more diversity in the police. And at what point, and I guess this is a wider subject outside of the police, it just becomes more profound when it involves institutions as important as British policing. You could fire that into other areas too, the army, the military too, even the National Health Service. Teaching would be another obvious profession where there is a kind of obsession, and I don't know how it took hold relatively quickly. It mostly comes out of the States, that kind of DEI hiring, the whole diversity thing, where, you know, companies and corporations are making billions, by the way, globally, billions, tens, hundreds of billions, out of going around to companies and governments and saying, we're here to de-racialize your members of staff. Book us, we'll get them all on a course, and we'll make sure none of them are racist. We've got this whole kind of bias thing that we're going to, you know, they don't think they've got it. The ones that don't think they're racist are probably still racist. Really? And of course, so many corporations joined up with this because they thought it made them a nicer person. It's a bit like that old Stonewall outfit, how many subscribed to that old caper for the same reasons. Yeah, this sounds like the good stuff. And of course, it showcases and preens our whiskers of diversity and decency. And of course, it invariably does the very opposite. It just makes you look stupid, and it will end up with very bad results. That doesn't in any way mean you don't try and recruit people who are reflective of society. You just don't have to do it through these kind of bizarre, weird, almost unionised like cartels of either private educational companies or panels or people like Sadiq Khan and Cressida Dick. It is a nonsense. And where it leaves us is not just a bad taste in our mouths over British policing. It leaves us with a potential distrust of the police. Do you still trust the police in this country? 0344 499 1000.
TV drama on Channel 5 on Sun Investigation. Look Who's Hugh. Martin Clunes playing disgraced BBC pedo Hugh Edwards, the man that announced the Queen's death. It was the voice of the news. I'm going to try and be as calm as possible because I want your take. I think it is an absolute disgrace that pedo is walking the streets getting £200,000 a year. I cannot believe the BBC are so goddamn incompetent. I'm paying my licence fee so that pervert can live comfortably. It does my head in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk. It is Talk. 10 to 2 on the home of common sense. We got there in the end. Lots to get through here. We're going to talk about fuel duty in just 1 second. First, let's get a voice note on that issue of policing. This comes from Sharon.
Afternoon, Ian. I think what we're going to have to do now with the police force is go back to retraining, and we need to have somebody in that can train them to police force standards rather than tweeting and naughty word standards. They need to know now that they're up against people that are dangerous, even more so now than what they were before. So there need to be people that can stand up, not a 4'3" woman, that can't even chase anybody. We need proper standards now put back into policing and the army and everything else. Get rid of all these people that's no good at the job, just there just because of the right colour or the right ethnicity. It's just crazy. We've got to be protected, and we can't have people protecting us that can't do the job. Just simple.
That's a very good point. Thank you for that, Sharon. And this comes in from Keith, who says, as a 30-year police officer, I would sit on interview panels for new recruits. We were told, by no means fail anyone. The recruitment team and senior officers would do the rest. This was an order by the chief superintendent. We, of course, didn't and robustly interviewed candidates. The note, the Home Office would fine forces if they didn't meet recruitment numbers. Hence, if they have pulses, they are in. Yeah, and certainly when they've been trying to fill a shortage. Things go from bad to worse. 0344 499 1000. I just want to squeeze in a comment on this as well. Labour now set to phase in fuel duty rises from September, which ends that 5p per litre cut that has been frozen for years, frankly, marking the first increase in more than a decade, prompting pressure on Sir Keir Starmer for a possible U-turn, as critics warn motorists will be hit at the pump. Let's speak with William Yarwood, Media Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. William, good afternoon to you. What I find interesting about this is I think I've seen 4 different speeches by Keir Starmer in the last week talking about how we've turned a corner. 2026 is time for more money in your pocket. Happy days are on the horizon. And then we get hit with this kind of nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. More money in our pocket, more like more money in Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves's pockets, right? I mean, this is just completely disgraceful. You know, they ruled out fuel duty hikes in their first budget and in the last budget, which was welcome. But now they're cynically likely to raise it again in September. And let's just remember what fuel duty is. Many people think fuel duty is just a simple tax on petrol. It isn't. It's a tax on jobs. It's a tax on working families. It's a tax for the crime of simply going to the supermarket in your car, basically, or travelling around anywhere in your car. I mean, we have one of the highest diesel fuel duty per P in the EU. I do not think that hiking it anymore is going to actually prove good for taxpayers, and actually not going to prove for government either, because they're going to find there's a lot of public opposition for this.
I think they're absolutely spot on. It's interesting today, we've got the government rowing back on their increase in business rates. We've previously had them rowing back to some extent on farmers, before that rowing back on winter fuel, and I think I've missed 300 others there as well. I wonder if this fuel duty thing will be another row back come July.
Yeah, so that would be interesting, isn't it? So they rowed back on not on freezing it, and then they have to row back on freezing it again. There's a complete mess, but it just shows you how this Labour government operates. It brings up an idea, it pushes it out to the public naturally hates it, and then they reverse back on it a few months later. I mean, with the business rate hike things specifically, Ian, that shouldn't be massively celebrated. Not because I don't want pubs to pay those rates, but actually because it's simply a sticking plaster. This government claims to support pubs, and yet what they've done with the employment rights bill, minimum wage hikes, and employers' national insurance hikes, they're strangling the hospitality sector, including pubs, to essentially death, and they're handing this out like some sort of lifeline, when in reality it's a sticking plaster. So frankly, it's actually not good enough from the government, and the government, if it wants to save pubs, should reverse the hike it made on beer and alcohol duty, and should reverse the national insurance hike completely, and will reverse the business rates hike completely as well.
100%. Listen, great stuff, William. Nice to have you with us. Thank you, William Yarwood. He is, of course, Media Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. And I tell you what, just to tie this in a little bit with the police story, for this reason, we're talking about DEI hiring and all the kind of diversity targets and units and all those areas, and God knows, who is it recently have just hired 2 new characters in this area? Was it the BBC or the police? It's all these big institutions. I don't know how much money you would save across the board in government circles alone, but probably millions if we just did away with the nonsense and the faff. Carol is in North Yorkshire. Reference the police. Do you still trust the police, Carol? Good afternoon to you.
No, I don't. I'm not speaking as a wife of a 35-year policeman.
Wow.
He's been retired years now. But in the 1970s, I was vetted. He was vetted.
Yeah.
Our home was vetted. His parents were vetted. They ran to our house, checked everything, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful. To be quite honest, I'm very happy with Rupert Lowe. He's the best man in Parliament.
But we don't hear much common sense out of Parliament at the moment, do we?
We don't get any.
Yeah.
If I see Starmer on the TV, we switch him off.
Yeah. Well, my TV switches itself off when he comes on TV. What about that? I've got a whole new special alert button going on. What is it you sense, though, with the police? I mean, you're absolutely right. The recruitment was very different back then. Do you think it's because... is it the type of people that are joining the police, or is it the police service they join?
I wouldn't pass comment on that when they think that you go to university and you become a policeman. Hang on 2 seconds, I'll get my husband on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm talking to talkTV about the police. You tell them.
Hello, Peter Clewitt.
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. Just defrosting cars.
Yeah, well, it's got to be done. Better than trouncing the beat like you used to do back in the day, I'm guessing.
Well, I think the job that I left isn't the job that I joined by a long way.
Yeah. When did it change, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think when we started, well, I don't know. It's like a rash. It grows on you, doesn't it? Then you, it would be difficult to pinpoint a year.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think my wife was on to you about when we got vetted before the police.
Yes,
I mean,
which was extensive.
Well, I wouldn't say it's expensive.
No, extensive, not expensive.
Oh, sorry, yeah, expensive. Yeah, I mean, but now, I mean, reading the mail this morning and whether that serial rapists are being allowed in, I just can't believe that.
I mean, we are in very different territory, aren't we? Thank you very much indeed for coming on at the end there. I think you said Pete, his name was, and Carol, his wife, before that. Thank you. He was an officer of 35 years, went through the vetting process. Now, there really isn't one. In fact, if you don't get the job, you go through a special panel, and they give you your job. This is Talk. Lines are open. Let's get the news at 2.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, yeah, welcome back home at Common Sense. Loads to get through. We are talking about this extraordinary story from the Met Police facing fresh criticism after reports have revealed that rapists and violent offenders, you heard that correctly, were hired as officers when full vetting checks were dropped. This was in a rush to boost recruitment and boost diversity. Sadiq Khan, you are the Police and Crime Commissioner for that city. I was about to say pull yourself together, get in the bin. Just resign, mate. I mean, this is outrageous and it's on your watch. At what point do those in charge not take responsibility? Also this afternoon, Kemi Badenoch pledging to abolish business rates for thousands of pubs alongside cutting average energy bills by more than £1,000 under a cheap power plan that rolls back on green rules and regulations. And since she made this announcement, the government have said they are going to revisit the increase in business rates. It's another reverse ferret from Starmer and the boys over there at number 10. Can Kemi Badenoch claim she scalped them on this one? And British forces helped the United States seize that Russian-flagged tanker in the North Atlantic, a move condemned by Moscow and heightening tensions. How involved should we be going forward in America's spat with other countries? Details to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This in from Richard. We're talking about the police and recruitment and the wrong uns. Richard says it's good to note that Carrick and Cousins, two, of course, very notorious, horrendous characters, both came out of the police's parliamentary and diplomatic protection unit. And it produced, there's only 900 of them, and it produced these two wrong uns. Such a small unit, and they carry guns. Absolutely crackers. Yeah. I don't know if every one of them carries a gun, but you're absolutely right. But that was the department both of those men were in. And this in from Lash, who says, I'm security cleared for my job. When going through the renewal, they dig really deep and it takes months. I'm also a foster carer. The checks and training for that took 9 months. They interviewed my friends, my parents, my children. They did an enhanced criminal records check. They audited my finances, my savings and my mortgage. I am astounded by the news that a man who is a potential danger to children is allowed the power of arrest and oversight in this process. I can almost understand, but a conscious decision to improve based on the colour of his skin is utter madness. It makes me sick. I think we need to put in a freedom of information request to find out who was on the special panel that overturned. I don't know how much specific information the first interview process had on this person. It may not have been quite as notable as we then found out, but there were clearly flags and he was told that he hadn't got the job. But then they looked at the special panel. Ooh, the special panel came along and went, yeah, no, he's all right. I'll give him the job. Went on to rape 13 rapes, including 6 of a child. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back to more of your comments in a few moments. You want to leave a voice note as well, it is the same number. So what about this? Kemi Badenoch pledging to abolish business rates for thousands of pubs alongside cutting average energy bills by more than £1,000. This is under a cheap power plan that rolls back green rules. The Tories say the policy would be funded by cutting welfare spending and reducing the civil service as the Treasury revisits reversing Labour's budget changes that will see pub rates rise by 15% next year, with COVID-era relief ending this April. The industry warns that many of Britain's 45,000 pubs are at risk. Let's have a listen to the leader of the opposition holding Keir Starmer to account.
The Prime Minister gave his word that he would help pubs, yet they face a 15% rise in business rates because of his budget. Will the Prime Minister be honest and admit his taxes are forcing pubs to close?
Well, they are indeed forcing pubs to close. They happen to be the government of the day. I know this sort of goes back many years when you look at the expenses and the challenges facing hospitality, particularly pubs. But yeah, the government say, oh yeah, no, we've listened, don't worry, we're not going to do that thing now. Or maybe a variation of it. Dawn Hopkins is the Vice Chair of the Campaign for Pubs and licensee of the Rose Pub and Deli in Norwich. Good afternoon to you, Dawn. Nice to have you with us. I mean, it's hard to keep track of this, isn't it? You know, 1 minute it's in, then it's off. Is it all off? Is some of it off? Either way, it's already an exhausting process financially to run any kind of food and drink establishment in this country.
Absolutely. So, yes, it's... until we know the detail of what they've decided to do, it's very hard to comment on it. But yeah, running a pub at the moment, we've got 8 pubs closing a week for good. We've got spiralling costs. The price of your pint is going up, and that's because we have got so many, such a barrage of costs facing us. And that's the only way we can survive. And really, we don't want the pubs just to survive. We need them to thrive because they're so important to our communities, our local economies. So I think it's very interesting what's happened here. Obviously, we haven't got the detail of what they're going to do about this discount. But I think it just shows how much people care about their pubs and how much they care about them and want to keep them going, that this is actually, we've been able to get to a point where they're looking at doing something about it.
Yeah, and this sort of pre-COVID thing that has gone away, I mean, it's all very well saying, yeah, but, we told you it wasn't forever. Businesses don't really work like that. And, of course, this was many years ago now. So for something to suddenly reappear, which in many cases is putting tens of thousands of pounds onto the business rates of often quite smallish establishments and independents as well, is horrific. And, of course, there are others that are first-time business owners that are, came in at a certain set of rates and suddenly told a year down the line, oh yeah, your rate, your 50,000 a year is now 80,000 a year. I mean, these are unsustainable numbers.
Oh, absolutely. And although I think publicans are some of the most hardworking, amazing people on the planet, not many of us have got crystal balls to be able to, see that this was going to happen. We came out of COVID, we had restrictions, then came along a cost of living crisis. We've had the utilities go absolutely nuts, which we've had no help with whatsoever. And we had, the previous budget, we were told, or at the budget, we were told that the business rates would go down, the multiplier was going down. And then there was this massive reevaluation, which is, it just negates any of that. And, and it's also, we are an industry in crisis. Sure. And it's very interesting that, for instance, huge supermarket chains, their business rates have, not changing or hardly ever anything. Huge retailers, they're not having this big hike. So it just really, really feels like an industry that's, it is on its knees, has been totally targeted by this.
They're talking about relaxing rules to allow pubs to open longer hours, more licensed pavement areas that people can sit outside. As I guess this is meant to be a way to address some of the problems. Does that, I mean, I guess it's welcome if you want to open longer, but is that really touch the sides?
No, that's not going to make a huge difference. Many of us are looking at cutting our hours, reducing the hours because the costs we've now got to incur with the labour costs that have come in. So, I mean, I wonder, did the government ever speak to any publicans to actually say, do you want this? Will this make a huge difference to you? Because I think the majority of us are going to say no to that.
Yeah, what do you, if Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves were sitting here now, Dawn, what would you tell them that would be the first thing they could do in order to recognise the challenges of your industry and not just allow it to stabilise, but allow it to thrive?
I think we'd say we're not looking for handouts. We are looking for support, and we need them to understand how much that our industry has been through. So the things with the business rates, the reevaluation, that needs to be looked at totally and stopped, hopefully. And also go back to the discounts. And we also have to look at the VAT rate. That's absolutely crippling us. We just don't want to be, we don't want to just survive. We do want to thrive. We want to have people coming out to the pub. We want to have them being able to afford a pint. We want to be able to continue employing staff. We want to invest in our businesses and our premises. Yeah. We want to be a thriving part of the economy. And at the moment, all we're getting is these huge costs being thrown at us and the government not understanding how squeezed we are and how bad this situation is.
Spot on. Listen, Dawn, good luck with everything. Let's hope that there are more changes that are in the positive. But thank you for joining us. Dawn Hopkins, Vice Chair of the Campaign for Pub and Licensee of the Rose Pub and Deli in Norwich. Thank you to her. Back to your comments. Reg Gardner says, you're talking about two-party politics. There's a question for you. If Reform win the next election, which I hope they do, and the Tories come second, will that mean the Conservatives would be opposition to the Reform Party? Indeed it would. Yeah, that's exactly what it would mean. They would be the opposition. And then, of course, give it a couple of years and people will start talking about two-party politics again. Because that's the way it works, isn't it? It's just the uni party. In fact, maybe more so than ever, because this will be the Tories and Reform. They're arguably slightly closer than Labour and the Tories currently are. NC says, Happy New Year. The Met failed properly to vet officers, including convicted rapists, and we're supposed to have confidence. Trust dies when safeguarding is optional and excuses are automatic. To me, it's this pervasive DEI thing that's snaking its way. It's had a no checks, free reign throughout institutions, governments, departments, floors, teams, in all sorts of grand areas of life. It's just managed to be adopted almost without question. Not in a basic way. We all understand the basic necessity of making sure that there is fairness for everybody, and everybody has the opportunity, whether you're male, female, black, white, brown, gay, straight, Muslim, Jew, Christian, whatever. I mean, that's just a given, right? But this thing went like with booster rockets around institutions in this country, and that's how we've ended up here. Let's talk to Craig, who's in Darlington, on that issue of joining the police. Good afternoon to you, Craig.
Hello.
Hi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I just think it's the sign of obviously what's morally wrong with this country. Like I say, I've tried to get into 4 different police forces. Wow. Durham Constabulary, Cleveland, British Transport, and obviously Civil Nuclear. The latter, I had an injury before I obviously applied for the job, told them about the injury, and they turned around and said, due to the nature of the injury, we can't put you in a jeopardising position. I've trained my arm, I've done martial arts and all that kind of stuff, and my arm's probably in a more jeopardising position when I'm training. When I went for British Transport Police, I got offered a conditional offer, but then I heard nothing for 2 years consistently.
Wow.
And then obviously to find out that somebody like that has got in, I've had no criminal conviction.
Nothing at all. Yeah.
Nothing at all.
And is this just based on what they see as an issue with your arm?
Yeah, I dislocated my elbow, and basically they turned around and said they couldn't put me in a jeopardising position. Mm-hmm. Well, sorry, I was a lifeguard for 15 years, so I've been people, like, again, what the old school would have called life skills. But it just seems that the government and like even the police force in general are just wanting to go down the complete wrong route.
Yeah,
and
of course,
a police officer,
you really want the job as well, which should be, that should be of note. You'd have thought someone who's dedicated, they've applied multiple times, but keep getting either kicked back for this same tired reason. I get it. Listen, great to have you on with us, Craig. Thank you very much. Good luck with the 5th attempt as well, Craig in Darlington. On the note of the police, let's get this from Gav.
Just on the police, I applied for the police when I was 18. I'm 40 now, but I applied when I was 18, 19, 2002, 2003, 4. I got denied and rejected every time. I have 5 A levels because I went to school, did all that. But I had challenges with dyslexia, which made it my forms look a bit messy and a bit sloppy. I was rejected every single time, and with no reason, no why. So these guys have been rejecting people for no apparent reason for years. It's picky. Anyway, we need to fix it.
Gav, thank you. It is picky. And if you're a wrong un, don't worry, there's a special panel that will overturn the decision not to employ you because, we need more people like you, is what the special panel apparently think. 0344 499 1000. Big reminder here, by the way, we welcome the new year here at Talk with a massive giveaway. £26,000 could be what better way to kick off 2026 than with his chance to win some serious cash. Yes, 26 grand. 26k for 2026. Here is how you enter, okay? Do this now for your chance to win the money. Text TALK to 83338. 83338. £2.50 it'll cost you on the text, plus your standard network rate, or you can call 0343 423 9761. Lines close at midday on January the 9th. That's tomorrow. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. You've got to be 18 years old plus, It's a network promotion, and full T's and C's can be found at talksport.com/win. So your chance to win £26,000 by midday tomorrow. That's a lot of money, kids. By any measure, that's a lot of money. 26k for 2026. Do it now. Text the word TALK to 83338.
TV drama on Channel 5 on Sun Investigation. Look Who's Hugh. Martin Clunes playing disgraced BBC pedo Hugh Edwards, the man that announced the Queen's death. It was the voice of the news. I'm going to try and be as calm as possible because I want your take. I think it is an absolute disgrace that pedo is walking the streets getting £200,000 a year. I cannot believe the BBC are so goddamn incompetent. I'm paying my licence fee so that pervert can live comfortably. It does my head in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark says, with regards to pub rates, they don't pay rates on toilet and cleaning space. Is there not a way we can convert pubs like theme toilets? I was just wondering if one knows the law, how to get around it. There's been some interesting attempts at that, hasn't there? I remember when the smoking ban came in, there were some imaginative ways that some establishments decided they were going to try and avoid it. And they kind of half did, but only until they got caught. It's not they got caught and then avoided it. They just tried it, and then, you know, there's always one person that's going to report them and go, hey, they got here. There was a bar me and a mate used to occasionally go in London, and the guy there, he actually hired Cherie Blair as his barrister to represent him on this case. He said customers are allowed to ask for an ashtray, and if the staff refuse, which would be the law of the land because there's a smoking ban, then that puts the member of staff in a dangerous position by refusing somebody's request. So that could be a breach of health and safety and the rights of the member of staff. So he's protecting his staff in order to allow people to smoke. It was nonsense, really, wasn't it? But that was what he tried. I think he got away with it for about 3 weeks, and then somebody rang Westminster Council and said, there's a fella doing some ruse with ashtrays. Back to your calls. Matthew in Warrington. Reference the police, Matthew. What have you got for us?
Yeah, right. It was just 2 quick points. I'm an ex-Welsh Guardsman, so appearance means a lot to me. If you're smart and you turned out smart, it tells you a story about you as a person, that you care about yourself, you have a bit of self-respect, you have good personal hygiene. So if I see a police officer and he looks smart, I'll give him the respect that's due.
Yep.
I seen a copper the other day. He spoke to me because I was driving the van. And he was asking where I was going, just generally, and he looked like he'd slept in his uniform. He was unshaven, his boots were dirty, and I just thought, my God, you're an officer of the law. Come on.
Yeah, because that kind of stuff was. I mean, the police used to have a bit of a military element to it in terms of how you were turned out, didn't it? Your shoes had to be polished and your shirt certainly ironed.
Yeah, but now I'm going on forward now. I volunteer with the RAF cadets. I'm a civilian instructor, and I'm going to go back into uniform. They've asked me to go back into uniform for as a support staff.
Sure.
And there's the CRB, the check I've got to do for the MOD now. It takes 6 months, even though I've done a CRB to work with children, safeguarding, and now to go into uniform, the process that I've got to do through the government takes 6 months for me to get the clearance before I can go in front of the board to see if I can go back into uniform. So if they're doing that with me with just cadets, why can't they do that with the police? Why are they just pulling people in, throwing them in a uniform, and they're breaking the law and up to all kinds of...
Because somebody has educated certain senior figures, either in the police but it comes from the top, through government, through institutions, that you need to get your house in order and start recruiting people from so many different backgrounds. They've lost sight of quality over and put diversity over quality.
In the military now, they have a civilian company that does the checks on people joining up. And so many young men and young people are getting knocked back through health. One of the lads who I served with, he left a couple of years ago. He was doing the recruitment in Wales.
Yeah.
And he said he had 2 lads that he took all the way through college in the military cadets, wanted to become Welsh Guards, and they got knocked back because 2 cousins or 2 great aunties had breast cancer several years ago, and they wouldn't accept them on their medical grounds that a sort of once, twice removed family member had a form of cancer. That's how stupid it is. Now, how, no wonder we can't get anyone in to join our police, our military or anything, because these civilian companies, not like when I went in, he was saying, well, have you been in trouble with the police? Well, no, but I don't want to be. All right, OK, we'll do this exam. Go and run around that pitch in a certain time. Make sure you're good and get a good school report. And where you go, you're in. Yeah. Now, it's all changed. It's all too woke. It's all too...
It's just very, very bizarre that you never meet a real person in real life, Matthew, who agrees with any of this nonsense. So you wonder what game they're trying to play. I don't imagine there's many brown or black people that want to be recruited because of the colour of their skin.
No, they want to be recruited for the character and the personality. Where the police messed up, when Tony Blair changed it from being, instead of bringing people in from the military or solid backgrounds who've got life experiences, it basically said you can't become a police officer unless you've done a degree. And all these, now 20 years later, all these young officers are now senior officers who've got the degrees. They've never got their hands dirty. They've never been in a bar fight on a Saturday night trying to pull people out. Or they've never, and this is where it's falling down massively. Because, good people stop bad people doing bad things at night. And that's where what it boils down to. Whether it's the military or the police or it's the ambulance service or the fire brigade, you need strong personal characters to go in. And they've got to do, whether you're black, you're white, you're male, you're female, whatever your religion is. If you can go in and do a job, that's what it should be about. And nothing else, nothing matters.
Yeah, it's all common sense. A 10-year-old will be able to work this out. But for some reason, the agitators are out there and they've got big voices, and that's loud voices. Matthew, great. Thank you very much indeed for that. Good luck with the next step as well that you alluded to. Matthew in Warrington. Miranda is in Cumbria. Miranda, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hello. I'm sorry, I've got a sore throat. But my son and 2 of his friends who were at university together, all 3 of them applied for the police force. My son applied for the Manchester Police. But essentially, 2 of them were knocked back because essentially one of their friends had done something terrible to himself. So they'd all taken on a tattoo to remember him. But it was the cover of an album cover. Yeah. And it had something like a dagger on or whatever. They were knocked back because of the tattoo on their arm.
Really?
My son wasn't. However, I'm really surprised that they're quite prepared to take on a rapist.
Tattoos bad, rapists. Well, we could let them through.
Yeah, just let them through. Even though my son's 2 friends both had degrees, really hard-working, really have good, steadfast, good character. But no. But they prefer to take on somebody who'd raped a baby. Unbelievable.
This is unbelievable. Was the tattoo, I'm bound to ask Miranda, was there anything on it that could have been kind of misinterpreted? I mean, if it's a swastika, we get it, but I'm assuming it wasn't that.
No, it was nothing sort of like political or other. It was basically the cover, an album cover, which their friend had really liked. And obviously, they don't think about things when they do, and when something like that, tragic like that happens, they just gone straight away and had
No, I get that. I get that. And also, tattoos in themselves are not illegal in the police. I think a few years back they had some debates about it. But yeah, it's fine, and you regularly see them on display with officers.
Absolutely, and it was a particular rapper that my son's friend had liked, because they were all into the same music, and that was it. So it was nothing political, nothing obscene. It's just incredible, really. I'm stumped for words, basically. It's just true.
It is, yeah. I mean, this one is a jaw dropper in terms of the content of the details of the particular story we're highlighting. Miranda, thank you very much indeed for that. Great to have you with us. Good luck with everything. Barry says, afternoon, Ian. Mark Rowley, he's the current Commissioner of the Met Police, doesn't want veterans in the Met, stating they are not the type of people he wants, but is happy to welcome rapists and thugs. It's time he went, preferably without a gold-plated pension. Yeah, in fairness, I've not heard Mr. Rowley say those particular words, but I understand where you're coming from, Barry. I mean, I think former military personnel are often, not always, and it won't be for everybody's cup of tea, but there are some obvious correlations between doing that job and doing the job of policing. And they've kind of sanitised the whole thing and decided that, no, that's not, we don't want people that look a little bit tough. We'd rather have a slightly more, bit of a touchy-feely approach to some aspects of our policing. We want diversity to be at the forefront, even at the expense of quality. And that in itself is a crime scene. Rowley or anyone else, College of Policing, whoever it happens to be, that might be involved in a decision that resulted in someone who was a bit iffy at the interview process, but a special panel decided otherwise. Anyone involved in that special panel, you really should be gone. I think we all know that. Probably the people on the panel, when their head hits the pillow at night, would concede, I don't think I should be doing this job, really. I'm probably the wrong person. You really are. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is talk. 0344 499 1000. Mark's in Solihull says, with regards to pub rates. Oh, I did just read this one, didn't I, about converting toilets. It's a good point. Maybe they need to think outside the box. I'm sure pubs are trying to do all they can to put them in a different category. But, of course, you've still got to remain a pub at the heart of it all, haven't you? Dorian in Dover says, no one will get fired and they will just be moved on to another well-paid civil service job. This is the special panel over there at the Met. Who are this curious special panel that are giving the green light for people who turned out to be child rapists, for God's sake? Let's move on to this story. It's worth taking another look at this and a catch-up. British forces supported the US seizure of that Russian-flagged oil tanker yesterday. This was in the North Atlantic, aiding a 2-week pursuit and providing RAF surveillance and naval support under international law after Washington targeted the vessel for alleged sanctions evasion linked to Venezuela, Iran and Russia. Russian military assets were nearby and Moscow condemned the action as illegal, escalating tensions with the West. You keeping up on this? Sean Bell is a military and defence analyst. Sean, good afternoon to you. This was a curious story when it broke yesterday. We couldn't quite work out what the heck was going on. There seemed to be first of all, it started out as Venezuelan, then it became Russian, then it became something else, then it went back to being Russian, then Venezuelan. Turns out, well, who owns this tanker for a start? And is this escalating in any significant fashion, that war of words between the West and Putin?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. I mean, it was a Tom Clancy novel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
Played out in public. I mean, I'm no expert at sea law, but, you know, ships at sea can sail under flags of convenience. It was being switched around. You're not meant to do that when you're at sea. And, you know, innocent passage is one of the rules of the sea. So, but I think the other thing you mentioned, you talked about this race across the Atlantic. You know, the Bella 1, which is the tanker we're talking about here, is a third of a kilometre long. Wow. It's 333 metres long. Its maximum speed is 10 knots, so even you and I could probably catch up with it at a run. So it's not entirely clear to me, you know, exactly why it took so long to run it down. What I do know is, as a guy who's operated off Her Majesty's carriers several times, often embarking and getting off on helicopters, unless the ship and the helicopter are working together, it can be very dangerous. And I suspect that's one of the reasons why the Americans' Coast Guard found it quite hard to land on it. But it was an amazing story. And of course, all these things happen at sea, so we have to rely on third-party reports, don't we, to work out what actually happened.
Yeah, and as you rightly say, it's worth just dwelling on that point. This was a 2-week surveillance. I mean, I'm assuming it wasn't because they couldn't physically catch it. No doubt they were trying to establish other factors here. The other interesting element, of course, is that British forces were at some level involved in this. Would that, as far as you can tell, Sean, would that have been because of an arrangement specifically with the United States, or is it, I mentioned international law there, in what kind of jurisdiction, militarily speaking, would the Brits have found themselves part of this?
Well, you're into, I think, a phenomenally interesting area, because you have to look wider than this ship, what's going on. You know, Trump has moved into Venezuela. He's threatening Greenland. You know, he's putting the future of NATO at risk. And of course, he's also making life very difficult for the Europeans with Ukraine. And all of this means that all the European leaders are walking a tightrope. They're trying to placate Donald Trump, but by the same time admonish him when they're getting it wrong. I think when this request came in for military help, there were two parts to the military help, one of which was the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. I think it was the Tide Force. That's a replenishment vessel. You can imagine some of the Coast Guard vessels from the US would have been a long way from home, and it might well have been that actually having a refueling and potentially some fresh fruit and veg able to be resupplied was very welcome. And the other thing was the Poseidon. It's one of our maritime patrol aircraft, probably the best in the business at providing situational awareness. And when you know that the Russians had claimed they had a submarine tracking this vessel and some surface ships, they had the potential for this to escalate. So it sounds like the UK was happy to provide some supporting elements whilst distancing themselves from the actual seizure itself.
Indeed. Sean, thank you very much indeed for your time. Sean Bell is a military and defence analyst. Thank you to him. Back to more comment from you. One here from Ross says, this isn't just happening in the police. This is kind of DEI and diversity mumbo-jumbo. The prison service is the same. Lots of recruits from Africa being coached for interviews. When raised enough to lose their majority. I think there's a typo there that I couldn't quite get through. A panel member was accused of racism and reported for investigation. One guy started when his criminal record check came back months later. He was, and then sadly the message ends, so I haven't got the rest of it. Thank you very much indeed for that, Ross. I think with the broad gist of what you're saying is there. Cliff says the Met Police in the past have underrepresentation of criminals in their ranks. As part of the DEI policy, they're working hard to correct this failing and now recruiting wrong-uns. Yeah, it could have been that. We haven't got enough former criminals or current ones, as it turned out. Bob's in Cambridge on the police. What have you got for us, Bob?
Yes, hello, Ian.
Hello.
Hello there. Many, many moons ago, back in the 80s, after I'd done my time in the army, I came out with an exemplary record. I'd done 2 tours of the Falklands, and you know, I came out and I applied for the police.
Yep.
It wasn't the Met Police. It was a police force up north. I went in and I went through all of the recruitment process, the interview process and everything, and I passed all the tests that they put you through, the interviews where they come to your house and interview you,
all of that,
and everything. Yeah, passed a lot. And then I got called through to my final interview with a couple of the top brass in there, and one of the questions I was asked. In fact, they were really, really heavy on race. They were very heavy on issues of race. And one of the questions I was asked was, what would I do if I was out with a colleague and that colleague made racist comments to me, even privately?
Yeah.
Would I have a word with him? Would I report him or what? So that you're put in a position where you think, well, do I say I'm going to report him and grass the colleague up and cause disquiet amongst the ranks, or am I going to have a word with him and say, look, do it again, and I'm going to... So I gave what I thought was an appropriate answer, a good answer, I thought.
Yep.
And I didn't get in, and I only on the answer that I gave. And the answer that I gave was I would have a word with him. In no uncertain terms, I would have a word with him, and I would say, if you do it again, I'm going to take it higher.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a reasonable answer. Anyway, I didn't get in, and that was the reason I didn't get in. I found out later that a friend of mine who worked who was a police officer, fairly senior police officer in the same force, told me that people who ticked the DEI box in those days, the ethnic candidates, the pass mark for the tests were lowered, and some of them got in, having scored lower on the tests. And so that was early on. That was one of the initial stages, and they actually got in. And I was told that they actually lowered the pass mark.
What would be the thinking behind that, though? I mean, this is so that they can say, we have recruited more people from this background or that gender or that religion. You don't have to know anything about employment or frankly any other aspects of life to see the utter ludicrous nature of that. Not just the ludicrous, but the potential damaging and even dangerous nature of that.
Absolutely. At various levels, at every level, it's dangerous. It's you know, and it's also going on the presumption that people from DEI communities are substandard when it comes to intellect, and they're not going to do as well anyway, so we'll make concessions for them.
That's where it gets even crazier, because whenever we talk about this, and I speak to somebody who's non-white, for example, that's one of the categories, in addition to religion, gender, whatever. I've never spoken to one of those people who thinks this is okay.
No.
So you have to wonder, so if the very people themselves that are involved in this, they don't want it, you don't want it, nobody with a brain wants it, who are this special group of anointed characters that do want it.
I know. It's and bear in mind, this was back in the 80s. This was around about 1987.
Yeah.
After I'd come out of the army.
Wow. So this wasn't part of the newfangled kind of, words like DEI were not around then?
No. This is what's interesting.
So they were at it back then?
They were at it back then.
Wow.
Absolutely. They really were. But now, I mean, they're absolutely open with it. They're more so. I mean, recently as well with the Royal Air Force, for example, the recruitment of aircrew specifically from the ethnic community. They were not hiring white pilots, were they?
Didn't they have to? Didn't they have to change that because it was?
I think.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. The fact that ever got out was just horrific. Just beyond. It's from a movie, right? It's from a kind of weird, upside down, probably highly watchable Netflix show. Should not be real life.
Yeah, and the people that are enforcing these days these DEI criteria, they're not doing anybody any favours. No, they're causing resentment at many levels.
Well, it's you're absolutely right. There's resentment all over the place. Bob, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I'd never factored this in before, because when you think of HR departments, for example, human resources used to be called, every time I try to think of it, I can't remember what they used to call personnel. I think it was just called personnel. And then human resources came along and they were kind of given maybe a little bit more teeth on issues. I mean, it would be unthinkable that anybody would visit the HR department unless they were about to get fired. That's really the only time you might come into contact with one. These days, people make a point. It's sort of a go-to place for your gripes, which I don't think was the original intention of a personnel department. Nonetheless, so you've got an HR department. Sometimes you've got a legit cause to see them, of course. I'd never thought about this before until somebody had said to me, think of the most left-wing union you can think of. Think of the kind of, well, it's hard to think of a right-wing union, but you take the point. The sort of Arthur Scargill, Bob Crow type way of running things. That is what your HR departments are. They are crammed full of sizzling lefties who are on a mission. Oh boy, they're on a mission. And of course they have to justify their own existence, and when they say in an interview, we'll recruit more people who are transgender or more Jews or, more people from working class backgrounds. That last one is a joke, by the way, because that never happens. When they say this, it's like, wow, these people are really good, and they use that horrible word progressive, and you're going to change the face of the company. It makes us look really modern. And you wonder who is, so they're kind of competing in an arena where no one knows who the kind of orchestrator is, specifically, but they're all playing the same game. Well, join in with this. Yeah, let's play recruit tick box. They don't know why. They think it's to make them nicer. They think it's to make them more progressive. Nobody can ever pinpoint or find the individuals specifically who insisted on it. And if you do, it's only your boss, because your boss can't find them either. And everyone's playing to this weird tune. And nobody's stopped to go, can we just stop? Stop! Can we just have a little rethink on this? No one's done that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
TV drama on Channel 5 on Sun Investigation. Look Who's Hugh. Martin Clunes playing disgraced BBC pedo Hugh Edwards, the man that announced the Queen's death. It was the voice of the news. I'm going to try and be as calm as possible because I want your take. I think it is an absolute disgrace that pedo is walking the streets getting £200,000 a year. I cannot believe the BBC are so goddamn incompetent. I'm paying my licence fee so that pervert can live comfortably. It does my head in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about the police, among many things here. Let's get a voice note from Debs.
Now, my brother-in-law left the British Army. He was a sniper in the Paras, and he applied to join SO19, I believe it is, the Met, as a firearms officer. And when he applied, he was told they weren't recruiting white people at that time. So he never got in. He now works for another organisation doing charity work. But yeah, just goes to show, doesn't it? But then British Airways did that years ago. It was investigated that depending on your ethnicity, whether your application form went into the bin or whether it went through for interview. So it's been going on for years.
I mean, the whites are a bit dodgy, aren't they? Let's be perfectly honest about it. I mean, what have the whites ever done for us? You could go on with that conversation. It is almost, again, I'm going to sound more incredulous each time I mention this. It's beyond parody. You're a bit white. Probably not what we're looking for right now. What are you looking for? Anything but you. That's nice, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. Don't go away. Tony and James with you in a second. We've got the Voice of Doom. It's day 9 of the Voice of Doom. It's the mystery voice, which, but it's political. You're looking for a politician, past or present, left or right, dead or alive, young or old, male or female, you name it. One task. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
Let's have another listen.
Going to be community relations.
Don't phone in, just message in if you fancy having a crack at it. Very simply, if we get a correct answer, we'll reveal it after the news. One more chance.
Going to be community relations.
87222 if you think you know. Back to your calls. Tony in County Durham. Reference the police. Tony, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm good as gold at this end. What's going on?
Right, jolly good. Right, I'm a retired police officer, and I was at training school in 1987. I did get through the selection process, and I recall being in class one day at this training centre. We had a chief inspector from the ethnic minorities who came in from a large neighbouring force, and he was quite open and honest. He said that he'd got his position, in his view, partly because he was from what we now call the black Asian minority ethnic communities. Yeah. And he was quite open and honest, and he was prepared to ride that wave for as long as he could. And then moving on, I was at a national police conference some years later. By that time, my career had progressed. I'd achieved a bit of rank. And there was a very senior officer there from the Met who was complaining about not getting promoted to the next rank. And this is a guy who's in the top echelon of policing in the UK. and he was blaming racism, and I was sat there thinking, well, if that's racism, can I have some, please? Because you've done very well. And from my from my perspective, whatever I got in the police was purely because of the content of my character, not the colour of my skin, to quote you know who. So yeah, it's been going on for years. Everybody knows it. It's the truth, if you like, that dare not speak its name, but it is out there, and it's a reality in the public sector, not just the police.
It is. I think, you're right. The wider conversation is, I mean, it happens in the private sector too, but you're predominantly in the public sector, whether you go through the NHS or education, the quangos that affiliate themselves with all of the above. That's where you'll find it perhaps more prolific. I get it. Tony, thank you very much indeed. An enlightening call from a former officer. Tony in County Durham. This is James in Salford. How you doing, James?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. My story is basically, I used to work as a prison officer. I've got my neck tattooed, my hands and the back of my head.
Yeah.
And that was all fine for the prison service. That was, all good. I did that for 2 years.
Yep.
And then I thought, I want to apply for the West Midlands Police. So went through the first stage, written stage. They come out and spoke to me. And then for my final stage interview, they basically said, they're making this big drive. They liked me. They liked my background. Never been in trouble with police. However, they didn't think that I traditionally fitted the look of a police officer.
Okay.
Being that they said, I might not be approachable in that sense. And in the end, I didn't get in. And it was basically because they said I didn't fit what they saw as what a police officer should look like.
Right, okay. Is that because of your tats?
Offensive tattoo. Obviously, in the prison, you can't have gang-related or offensive tattoos. Mine aren't like that.
Yeah, you didn't have "I hate gays" tattooed on the back of your head, did you? Which might be a problem.
No, I certainly didn't know. It's sort of like a Japanese floral pattern.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing. But for the police, they were having this big recruitment drive, and I didn't get in, even though I've been a prison officer, never been in trouble with police. But because I didn't traditionally look like what they saw a police officer should look like, I didn't get in. And the West Midlands have always had trouble in recruiting, and I just think they have this classic look of what they want someone to look like that they probably don't get that nowadays. Loads of people are tattooed, and even the bloke interviewing me said, would you say that your tattoos would make you look intimidating to a member of the public? And I thought, well, no, not at all. And he said, I don't mind tattoos, I've got tattoos, but me personally working in the police, I would never tattoo anywhere sort of visible or below my elbow.
Sure.
So I thought straight away then, I'm not going to fit their mould here.
Yeah.
Despite the fact of what the working history I've had and how keen I was to do it.
Well, I was going to say, you might think, and people have... divides the room a little bit, tattoos, and visible ones, I suppose, divides the room a bit more. But nonetheless, you might think that your experience in the prison service would have sort of overridden some of that, in the sense that you clearly had an experience in a not dissimilar line of work.
Yeah, I thought I couldn't be more qualified, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
And obviously that's probably why I got the interview. But as soon as they saw me, they pretty much, I could tell by the final interview stage, I wasn't going to get in, the way they were speaking to me about it and everything. And I almost wasn't surprised in the end. And I did make an appeal about it. And I think it was years ago now, and I basically just got an email back saying, we looked into this and we consider the matter closed. I thought, oh, well, that's that then.
Wow.
This line of work is not for me then, unfortunately.
Indeed.
Despite how, like I said, I was really keen on doing it.
Well,
and
quite.
Just turned away from just having some tattoos, which I thought nowadays probably makes me very approachable.
Well, I was going to say, it'd probably be compulsory that you might fall into one of those diversity groups now, James. I don't know. It's quite...
I'm sure in some sense I probably do, to be honest. Yeah,
is he the inked man from Stafford? Yeah, it's possible. James, thank you very much indeed for that. That's James. This is Ian in Cheshire. Do you trust the police still, James? Afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. It's Ian in Cheshire.
Ian, sorry.
Yeah, not really, because I had a little bit of a problem with them about a month ago.
Okay.
They came to my house twice. I wasn't in, I was working. Down through the door, I contacted them, and it all came down to a little altercation I had with a neighbour a couple of months ago, where they heard me swearing and they came for me. So
the neighbour heard you swear, reported you to the police?
Yeah, I parked in somebody else's space.
Right.
I was told to move by this other neighbour because this woman was in the car outside. I never actually spoke to the person who I presumably had done a little bit of effing and jeffing at, and the police came for me, and so I lost a bit of faith, really. I had to write a letter eventually, after a couple of interviews in the police station. I had to write a letter saying that I apologise for swearing twice and possibly gesticulating with my finger. Which I don't think I did.
I mean, look, we all do things that are not desirable. We often have a row and say stuff is not desirable. I don't know about the old bill showing up at your house. Was that necessary?
I don't think it was. I mean, I came in one evening. There was a little card there.
Yeah.
I emailed them back.
I mean, it wasn't their fault in a way, was it? Because somebody called them.
Yeah, that's right. But the police actually travelled 20 miles to my house and 20 miles back to another police station. They did that twice, and then on Sunday morning I came back and the police were walking down the driveway.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, can we deal with it in my house?" And they said, "No, you got to come to a police station under caution with interview with a recording
and let go."
And then about 2 weeks later, I was told that he spoke to his sergeant and they weren't going to prosecute me.
Well, Kel, surprise, right? You know, you gesticulated, maybe not your finest moment, and well, of course there shouldn't be any charges. This is nonsense. Ian, thank you very much indeed for that. That's Ian in Cheshire. Let's briefly hear the voice of doom.
Going to be community relations.
87222 if you think you know who that is. Let's get the news at 3.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. We're talking about the Met Police in particular, facing fresh, criticism slightly underplays the problem here. After reports revealed that rapists and violent offenders were hired as officers when the full vetting checks were dropped in a rush to boost recruitment and diversity. God, you gotta love them over there at the panel. We'll take more calls in response, and that does rather beg the question, do you still trust the police? Also this afternoon, a major Oxford University review suggests people using weight loss jabs regain weight up to 4 times faster than those on a diet and exercise plans once the treatment stops. Are you on the fat jabs? Are you one of those that's injecting yourself in the name of skinniness and vanity? We'll get some more detail on that shortly. It's not just women, by the way. Blokes go for this too. And Martin Clunes, the actor, will play Hugh Edwards in Channel 5's new 2-part drama called Power, the downfall of Hugh Edwards, examining the presenter's alleged double life and personal collapse after a 40-year BBC career. Would you be interested at any level in watching that? Details to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's get some more comment from you as well on the big issues of the day. Don in Chelmsford says, when I was a manager in the public sector, it was heavily unionised. Despite all the university targets, I always appointed the best person for the job when interviewing. Odd, I know. The other thing that used to happen with unions as well, which kind of you think would go very much against this, I think the old print unions had a PhD in this. It was always family. So if you got the job and you were in the union, in the right print union, your kid would get a job as well there. And chances are your brother-in-law worked over the other side of the floor. And matey was on the stone. He was there too. He was your cousin. That was just like, that was how it kind of rumbled. They had such power that it was catastrophic. I mean, to say it's an abuse of power, you'd think even by the most hardened union mind, they would acknowledge that it was an abuse of power. I mean, it was just ludicrous. But this predates my incursion, if you like, into this industry, but I was fully au fait and familiar with what was going on. I now work with many of the people who experienced it at the time. It was a crime scene, an absolute crime scene. You can't hold a business to ransom in that kind of way. There was a story of, I can't remember who it was, somebody used to work around here. They used to work on papers, and they went on holiday to Wales, and they were in a bar, and he got talking to a chap who worked, so he was a journalist, he got talking to a chap who was a printer at one of the national newspapers. And he said, oh, you're on holiday as well? He went, no, I'm not on holiday, mate. It's my 2 weeks off. He said, 2 weeks off? He said, yeah, it's not a holiday, though. I just get 2 weeks off every 6 weeks or something bizarre like that. I mean, they'd carved out these atrocious and unreasonable ways. Just extraordinary. So, yeah, they were guilty as well of a diversity quota back then. But the diversity was anyone that they knew or was related to them. Bizarre. Let's move then to this story of what they commonly call fat jabs. A major Oxford University review suggests people using weight loss jabs regain weight up to 4 times faster than those who use diet and exercise plans. This is once the treatment stops. Researchers found that users return to their starting weight within 2 years, prompting doctors to warn the drugs may need to be taken for life as concerns grow over long-term health risks amid soaring popularity in the UK. Let's speak with Tony Russo, obesity nurse specialist. Tony, afternoon to you. Just a point on the kind of arrival of these jabs, as it were. What continues to fascinate me is the speed with which this whole thing seemed to happen. Half an hour ago, nobody had heard of them. Fast forward 30 minutes, everyone's taking them. How the heck did that happen? Good afternoon.
Hello. I mean, I think it does seem fast, but for those of us working in the industry, it's actually been quite slow to get.
I was going to say, you're probably aware of these for years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, privately, they've gone really fast. And I think that what made a massive difference was the fact that so many non-doctors now can prescribe, and particularly pharmacists. I mean, new pharmacists qualifying can prescribe, and older pharmacists have done their prescribing qualification. Yeah. So it's made it so much easier. Before you had to go and see your GP with the associated weights. Now it's made it much more accessible to people. I think that's the big thing, really.
Yeah. And of course, I suppose one of the question marks, it's still sort of, I mean, I've lost count of how many people I know on these, and I'm sure, well, obviously in your world, but away from your professional work, I'm sure you too. No, it's almost, we all know at least a couple of people who are on them. It's taken hold rather quickly. But of course, the long-term effects are kind of right up there as one of the questions. So in the same way that I'm trying to think of another equivalence in the sort of pharmaceutical world of things we don't quite know what it's going to do, we are still a little bit in that stage, aren't we? There are still a lot of grey areas in terms of, well,
I think we are.
harm.
I mean, they've been around for a long time, and people underestimate that. And it's complete fluke. I mean, they were designed as diabetes drugs, and they happened to notice that they had a really good effect. It's similar to Viagra, really, because that had been around for a long time for heart reasons. And in fact, it wasn't that good at that job. But they discovered that, it had other, obviously very promising outcomes, and that's what it's really sold for now. So, they have been around for a long time. And I think that I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that these drugs don't have side effects, but a lot of the complications associated with them are more to do with complications associated with losing weight. So, for example, we know when you lose a load of weight, your chance of getting gallstones is much more common.
Okay.
So those sort of things are much more common. But, yeah.
Do you sense, Tony, that these are going to become just handed out by the NHS at some point because of the obesity issues we face?
No, they're too expensive. I mean, they will become cheaper. I can remember back sort of 30 or 40 years ago when wards would be full of people with bleeding gastric ulcers and they were having surgery. And then this great new drug came out, which doesn't even exist anymore, called cimetidine. And it kind of treated these problems medically. And that drug was so expensive. I mean, nobody got it prescribed. Eventually it came off license and it became cheap as chips, and now there are better drugs that have replaced it. So I think that these new drugs are getting better all the time, and I think that when they come off license they'll get a lot cheaper. But I think at the moment they're just too expensive to be used as much as they are now.
Does the weight loss work in a different way to how you lose weight if you go jogging or if you hit a good diet? Does it happen? And we often hear about people who've got the kind of Ozempic look about them. Is there any truth in that?
No, you still have to have a good diet. And I think that with any diet, even people that go on a, what do you call it, like a crash diet, that don't eat properly, they are likely to get things like muscle wastage. So you need to do, eat your protein and get some exercise as well. But, people do need to learn healthy eating habits. And to be honest with you, most of the people that I talk to, they've done every diet on earth. Many of them have been really successful. They just lost 3 stone and they regained 4. It's kind of a typical story. So they know what they should be doing. It's just that, unfortunately, Mother Nature's quite mean. And when we start losing weight, it throws out hormones to make us hungry.
Yeah, that's kind of what kind of messed up nature system is that?
It's very, very cruel.
Yeah, you think it would do the very opposite, right? I mean, if you were asking a kid what does nature do, they would say, well, it stops you feeling hungry once you start losing weight, because that's how that's the optimum place to be, or the preferable place. But it does the very opposite. The idea of a bacon sandwich becomes 10 times more tempting.
Absolutely, it does. And people say things like, well, you've been on these drugs for a year. You think you would have changed your eating habits. But somebody gave me a really lovely example the other day, and they said it's like, when you lose your mum, and it can be 5 years down the line, you suddenly smell their perfume or something about them hits you, and you still get that awful pang. And it can be a long time later, but you still get that pang. And that's the problem you get, because when you stop taking these meds, the suppression of your appetite goes, and you have that painful yearning to go back and eat again.
Indeed, the irresistible smell of something you love. Just a final point, Tony. In your experience, obesity is a world you know more than most people know more about than most people. What is, as far as your professional opinion goes, the best way to lose weight?
The best way to lose weight is to eat real food. I don't believe in anything that vilifies food. So I don't believe in protein shakes or taking any alternatives to food. I think getting into the habit of eating 3 episodes of food a day and having plenty of protein and vegetables is really the answer.
Got it. Thank you very much indeed, Tony. Tony Russo, obesity nurse specialist. Everybody's battled with it a bit to some level Even blokes, you know, people look at me, and I know I always say this, they go, he's a bit tasty. That's usually the first thing. Secondly, and you know, he's not, he's quite trim as well, clearly a fit character. And I get it, you know, and all the comparisons with you know, the big stars that get made. I've had it all my life. I understand that. But blokes still get that little bit round the middle. There's a little bit there. It's like, you know, women get cellulite, blokes get that. It kind of just, I don't know why that is the case, but it sort of is. It might not be even noticeable to the point that it's not like you wouldn't put your swimming trunks on, but it's kind of, so everybody's had a little bit of it. Food and trying to eat well we were talking about this in the office beforehand, but before we came on air, about cutting out sugar and the kind of things that you should eat. And Alicia, our producer, is doing a fun run at some point later this year. Oh, sorry, no, it's called a marathon, that's it, yeah. It's doing a park run, that's it. A marathon later this year. And obviously she's looking at, you know, the best kind of diets and, you know, trying to cut out as much sugar, certainly not drinking, all the sort of sensible stuff. There are people that do that all the time. Now, I don't know whether those people are ever really happy if you can keep that up all the time. I'd love to have the same addiction to that as I do to all the wrong stuff. Why does, again, as our previous guest Tony just said, why does nature not throw that up as there are people who are addicted to going to the gym, and I kind of look at them in a similar way to the way I look at somebody who's addicted to alcohol or something. It's equally as weird or unfortunate, however you care to look at it. But there doesn't generally seem to be that I've got to get out, I've got to eat the right stuff. When I come home from work, walk into the house, and this is probably a learned instinct, I am instantly hungry. I instantly want something, even if it's a bag of crisps or something. I just want that sense of a flavour. And I think we all have that to certain degrees, don't we? 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to your calls. 3:15. Richard is down in London. Richard, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Hey, Ian.
Hi.
It's good to speak to you again. I mean, it's just a quick point. If you remember yesterday, we were talking about the issue of whether or not we would be willing to fight for our country.
Yeah.
And if you just sort of review all the people that have called up today and said, well, they didn't want me in the police force because I was white or I was too English, and you think, you know, it's almost like some sort of, is this a Woody Allen parody? I mean, do people think we're that stupid? I mean, do you know what I mean? I mean, why would you fight for a country that actually doesn't want you to serve as a policeman? I mean, it's, you know what I mean? It seems. When did we start kind of even accepting this? And I suppose the answer to that is, I would say, is probably post-Macpherson report, because if you remember, there was a huge kind of inquisition that started then. Jack Straw said something like, this inquiry will change Britain forever.
Yeah,
it did.
He was the Home Secretary, of course, at the time.
Because you had this whole idea of institutional racism, which basically said that the police is racist, the NHS is racist, that the BBC, everybody was racist. So everybody had to prove that they're not racist. And Ian, this of course, I think, I'm not sure anybody else has seen this, but this, I think, was really the fundamental reason why we've had this rape gang phenomenon really across the UK, because clearly police forces, social workers, did not want to be called racist. But it's important just to know it didn't come out of nowhere. You can actually track.
No, but it's rather regrettable, isn't it? Because I have no difficulty understanding, Richard, that investigations perhaps were sometimes woeful. In the case of Stephen Lawrence, which is the Macpherson report which came off the back of that horrific killing, I'm sure there were shortcomings because there was a mentality at that time by some that it was just another black kid. And so I don't struggle to understand that bit of the story. I think we all do. The bit I struggle to understand is, as a result of that, we have to call the whole police force institutionally racist, which, by the way, is a far more, it's a much bigger statement than what it's meant to mean, but it causes horrific damage because of how profound that statement is. Anyone that listens to that, if you didn't analyse what it's meant to mean, you would just assume what it's saying is that most police officers are racist.
Yes, and it's led to two things, isn't it? Really, because I mean, we can see clearly that people have been recruited to the police who would not have got into the police force under normal circumstances. But I think probably worse. I mean, this is a question for you, Ian. But I mean, I would go so far as to say that, in a way, British multiculturalism is so unfair, if you like, to the indigenous people. You could probably argue that Britain is the most racist country in Europe. It's racist to its indigenous people. Because if you think about it, Ian, it's quite hard to imagine the rape gang problem, which we think extends over, 20, 30, 50 cities at least. It's quite hard to think of that sort of taking place in any Eastern European country or Italy or France. What is it that we've got so badly wrong in Britain?
It's a good point.
And particularly when people, obviously, there was a racist killing in the Lawrence case and it wasn't investigated. But there would appear to have been tens of thousands of racist rapes of not one, tens of thousands of racist rapes against British or indigenous girls, and actually we almost didn't notice. Yeah. So it's almost like something. What went wrong in Britain that's gone, if you like, is like nothing anywhere else. It's almost like we've. I can't help but make that conclusion. We are the most racist country in Europe, but we're racist towards the indigenous British.
Towards the indigenous population. There is Richard. These calls are genuinely fascinating to me. Thank you, mate, for that. Richard down in London, because the nuances and the tentacles of these debates are just, forever. I often wonder, are we going through an era? It's a long era, by the way, because we seem to have been in it for all the time I've been an adult, but are we at some point going to come out of this sort of madness and common sense is just going to prevail? We're going to go, hey, we passed the test. It was sort of Game of Thrones type territory, man versus common sense problems, etc. And we eventually won, and wasn't that fantastic? We'll take more calls from you in a couple of moments' time. Let's do the voice of doom. We were asking you, can you identify this voice?
Going to be community relations.
Who do you think that is? These were some of the guesses we had. Ruth Kelly, remember her? Former, tempted to say, Education Secretary under Blair. Katie Lamb, no. Joe Swinson, no. Miriam Cates, no. Liz Truss, it is not. Haven't got a winner. It rolls over to tomorrow for day 10. Stand by for that. Meantime, talk about winning real things here. What about 26,000 quid? £26,000 could be yours within the next 24 hours. 26 grand. What better way to kick off 2026 with that amount of money? 26k for 2026. See what we did there. So lots of money could be yours. If you want to enter this, very simply, text the word talk to this number, 83338. That's 83338. £2.50 text cost plus your standard network rate, or you could call 0343 423 9761. Lines close at 12 p.m. tomorrow, the 9th of January. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. You've got to be 18 years of age plus. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksport.com/win. £26,000 by midday tomorrow. Just think about that for the next couple of hours. 26k could be yours. Text the word talk to 83338. That's 83338.
sort of rewirings of the state do need to be done, because I think vast parts of it, the Home Office I'd include in that, the Ministry of Justice I'd include in that, obviously what the hell is going on Britain's borders I'd include in that, and the Met Police I'd include in that. It's these unwieldy, out of control organisations that actually any one or two cabinet ministers who change colours and parties and stripes every few years, actually they come in and realise they're not in charge. These are being run by the organisations themselves to the detriment of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's get some voice notes on that big issue. We're talking about policing. Do you trust the police? Your thoughts on the diversity panels that are, which seems overturning decisions to not employ people who didn't really pass the test, and thinking, hang on, we've got some diversity quotas here, so maybe we should employ them after all. I mean, it's utterly... I can't say it's bonkers, because that makes it sound a bit funny. There's nothing funny about this. Let's get a voice note from Hannah.
To just tell you about my cousin, strapping lad, 6'2", farmer's son. All he ever wanted to be when he was a kid was a police officer. He applied to be a policeman down south, somewhere down south, and he was refused. And he did so well; he excelled in everything. And somebody within the police actually did say to him, "This is so annoying." He said, "It's because you're not mixed race or from a certain ethnicity." Broke his heart. Anyway, never mind, their loss.
To actually be told that you're the wrong colour, it's where we are, particularly in the public sector. Here's another from Dan.
This special group that ticked boxes and signed off basically a rapist's application to join the Met Police, how do they sleep at night? Are they paraded in front of a boss and told, oh, that guy you signed off, he's gone on to rape? I don't understand their mentality. And ironically, because of DEI, we'll probably never know who these people are.
Yeah, and as was said earlier, Rupert Lowe joined us to talk about this. You might kind of imagine that a freedom of information request will be able to specifically tell us, even if you didn't necessarily, I mean, I quite like the names, to be honest, it's that serious, but might be able to tell us that actually at least the titles or the descriptions in that respect of the people, were they police officers, were they civilians, did they come from somewhere else, who the hell were these people? This is Greg in Edinburgh on police and vetting. Greg, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. What are you thinking?
I'm just thinking back to 100 years ago, in my day as a cop, that you used to be vetted at home by an old cop. And,
right.
And now...
What, someone who actually knew what they were talking about?
Yeah. Some old near-end of service sergeant or inspector would come to your house and stick his or her knowledgeable sort of beak at you and say, yeah, that's the right sort of person.
Yeah.
And I don't think they do that anymore. And I think the problem was many years ago, and I don't know if it was a Labour government or a Tory government, so it's probably one or t'other, it was all privatised, and it was all to make money for private companies that are now in charge of recruitment.
Yeah,
so the likes of Serco and Capita, and they run it through an algorithm, or somebody who's never worked for the police will decide who joins the police.
Yeah. And there's the problem, isn't it? You stick it through one of these big corporations that have been kind of hired or bought in from the outside. And why they would do that, I don't know, because I think, Greg, we can all see the shortcomings of that system, right?
Yes. Yes, we can. And I'll tell you where else they do that as well, is in the immigration service. They used to do visa checks.
Yep.
By entry clearance officers who would all go through an application and through their experience decide that person's at it, that person's not. Again, all privatised by various big companies, again, Serco, Capita, and they make money out of checking who should be coming into the country, and that, I think, is a large part of the problem all over.
Yeah. Absolutely right. This is an entire racket, to coin a phrase. Thank you very much indeed for that, Greg. Great call with experience as well. Stuart's in Wigan on that issue of trust in the police. Stuart, what have you got for us? Hi.
I'd just like to say, me, that as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't trust a copper anywhere near as far as I could throw them.
Why not?
Anywhere near. Because they're not trustworthy.
Yeah, but why not? What have they done?
Right, hang on. It's what they've not done. They don't do the job. And I'd like to go back to your previous point as you can promise us that the majority of the police want to get the bad ones out. Well, I don't see how you can do that when 100% of the police knew about the Muslim rape gang, knew that little girls were getting abused and raped.
When you say 100% of the police knew about that, I mean that doesn't quite tell the true story here, does it?
Well, it does, because majority of the country knew about it.
Well, we'd heard all sorts of stories, but unless somebody is, I mean, for those who reported it and got no results, whether it was from the police, a teacher, a social worker, whoever, throw the book at them. But you can't blame a copper sitting in Bromley police station for that.
I can.
Why?
Because as I'm concerned, every one of them turned a blind eye.
Well, I mean, he can't just suddenly leave his police force and go and move to somewhere else in order to investigate. Anyway, I take your point. Stuart, thank you very much indeed. Your phone line, by the way, no conspiracy here, mate. Your phone line is slightly clanky and mucking around a bit. Ash in Slough says, in response to Richard's excellent call, we have an institutionally racist police force. They were in front of the Parliamentary Committee 2 days ago. This is because in England is the last country where the British Empire still rules. All the other Anglosphere countries, such as Canada, Australia and New Zealand, have laws that protect the indigenous people. Here the Empire still governs with its discrimination against the English and no national parliament, says Ash in Slough. I kind of hear, maybe there's a bit of tongue-in-cheek there. I tell you, if you go to France or Germany, Spain, most European countries, certainly in New Zealand, you will find that the diversity quota thing is alive and well and ticking. More on that to come. More calls from you. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about this extraordinary documentary, drama, whatever you want to call it, about Hugh Edwards. It's interesting, given the subject matter. Interesting that somebody went ahead and made this, but it's going to show on Channel 5. We'll get the details in a few moments with Rod McPhee, TV editor with The Sun. He'll join us next on Talk.
Across the UK DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. Just gone 3:30. 0344 499 1000. Forgive me if I just came in a little urgently there. I was just chatting with Rod McPhee, TV editor at The Sun. We were talking actually, Rod, weren't we, about the sort of changing face of the media and about how kids today, and we sound really old talking about this, but like my kids don't know the phrase, what side is it? If somebody says, oh, there's a great show coming up, great programme, what side is it on? That was always the terminology, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone would go, oh, it's on BBC or ITV. I don't even think my kid knows, he knows of the BBC. He doesn't see it as a TV channel. Or ITV he wouldn't really recognise.
No. And if you use a phrase like, I'm out tomorrow night, I must tape that. You know, that's just another level of that'll blow the mind.
That's a whole other level.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You know, I remember years ago. Do you remember Channel 4 did a great drama called? We're going to talk about dramas in a moment. Called GBH.
Yes.
Michael Palin, Robert Lindsay.
Was it Alan Bleasdale?
It was Alan Bleasdale.
Yeah.
It was absolutely brilliant. And me and my mate watched this at the time. We thought it was the best thing we'd ever seen. I get into radio and I was asking on air, did anyone record this at the time? Has anyone got a VHS of it?
Yeah.
And I asked for years if anyone had a copy of GBA. And some people would go, I think I've got it. Oh, no, sorry, we haven't. It was something else. And then eventually it came out, and then called DVD. Now, you never have to any longer look for something. You don't miss anything.
No. But having said that, it does make me wonder that in our new digital age, does everything get kept? You know, at least when you had a VHS tape, you had some physical thing on which you had a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, do things slip through the net, and then because they're all digital, if it slips through the net, has it gone forever? That's what I always wonder. You know.
Do you know what though? Despite the strange world we live in, the multimedia platform of streaming, my kids still say the same thing. There's nothing to watch.
But how can
that?
No,
I always say that's impossible.
There's too much to watch. That's the point. Is that they don't know where to begin. Whereas you and I probably only had like 3, maybe 4 channels.
Yes, that's right.
You know, so you watched what you were given,
and certainly for kids, because obviously, you know, there's the CBeebies thing. There's that for the younger ones. But what a lot of people don't realise, even if you go onto like Amazon Prime or whatever, just click on the kids section. Oh my God, there's like 20 million shows there.
Yeah.
So each one of those streaming platforms, you tend not to need to look at them because you're an adult watching Netflix, but they will all show you. I mean, Netflix as well. You know, the amount of programming out there is off the scale.
Yeah, they don't know where to begin. I mean, you and I
don't know they're born.
Yeah, but also when we go on Netflix or something like that, we go on there and we don't know where to begin. So how's a kid going to know?
Yeah.
You know, so
it's kind of funny that the Netflix. Could it be called the Netflix problem? Is that pretty much, I reckon, most things you end up watching on Netflix is because somebody you work with recommended it.
Yeah.
Because we've all done that scroll of doom, haven't we? Where you've sat there. I've been on long cab journeys coming back from a newsroom and to go home.
Yeah.
And I've sat there thinking, I'll watch something in the car on the way back. Even that's a bit weird, isn't it? Talking about sort of, you know, strange and change of language. And I've got my phone in my hand. And I'm scrolling away, and then when I finally find something, and even that I'm not so sure about, I realise I'm like 5 minutes from home, because you can do that forever.
Oh yeah, and they like to do that, because while ever you're doing that, you're on their side.
Yeah.
And they know that's what's important, is hooking you in, you know.
Absolutely. I was watching a thing called Black Swan. Did you ever come across that on Apple?
Was that the movie?
No, it was the Taron Egerton drama, American drama.
Okay.
On Apple TV. I've just started watching it.
Do you mean Blackbird?
Blackbird.
That's
sorry.
it. Black Swan was the
Blackbird.
The one about ballet.
And here's a weird bit of education, because I normally think you know more about, you know, actors and their CVs and their background. So I'm thinking, you know, who is this great young American actor? I mean, I'd heard of Taron Egerton. I hadn't really bothered to look him up before. And I thought, you know, is he come from Wisconsin? Is it Mississippi? Look him up. He's a Scouser.
Yeah.
He's born in Birkenhead. I couldn't believe it. He actually defines himself as Welsh, but
yes.
But great shows like, so what, you know, when you've discovered a new one, it's a great feeling, isn't it?
It's like panning for gold. There's a lot of grit to get through before you find those little gems in there, but they are out there.
Absolutely right. The reason we're talking, though, of course, is another drama that's not on Netflix or Apple TV. It is on Channel 5. I didn't know Channel 5 seem to do these things every now and again, don't they? They come up with a sort of biopic drama of some kind, and it's Hugh Edwards, they've decided, to tell the story in a 2-part drama.
That's right. So this is something that has just been announced or just been confirmed. The Sun already knew about it because on The Sun, we've been working on the story for the past 2 years. So we've been working in conjunction with Wonderland Studios, who are producing it, and Channel 5. It's a pretty mammoth task to condense down 2 years or more of stuff into 2 hours. But amazingly, they've done it. And it looks like it'll be a bombshell drama, I tell you.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Martin Clunes is playing the main part of Edwards. And it's... For directors, it's a really tricky thing. You don't want an impersonator.
No.
As in, you know, I don't know, John Corshaw or something. You don't want that.
Yeah.
So you've got to really kind of ride that fine line of you're not going to parody it to the point of comedy or ridiculously. Someone's got to take it seriously, and of course the subject matter. It's a bit like there's been multiple films where people have played Jimmy Savile over the years. You've really got to tread carefully with that one.
Yeah, because you don't want it to sound hammy. It's a serious topic. You know, you want to,
of course it is,
and you don't want to be a distraction from the story. You know, obviously the character's incredibly important, but if you're sort of listening to their accent or looking at their mannerisms too much, you almost have to forget that they're there.
Yeah.
Then, you know, because otherwise you're getting distracted from the story and the facts, and that's incredible. But, I mean, apparently, by all accounts, he does a fantastic... Sort of, he captures the spirit of Hugh.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. He doesn't have to have a perfect rendition. It just needs to capture some of the essence of the man.
It is an extraordinary story, and because it's a little while ago now, and we're all aware of the horrible nature of what happened with this former national treasure, as it were. But it's that point, isn't it? I remember when this first came out, and obviously, without sounding a bit smart about things, working in our industry, as you know, you do tend to, names do fly across the desk. And,
of course.
And this one, when it wasn't made public, I had mates and neighbours texting me going, is it this person? Is it that person? Some people were just doing it online, which is a bit iffy. But I don't advise you to do that online, by the way, because you are actually libelling somebody every time you suggest they might be, I don't know, an offender of some kind. But the Hugh Edwards, of course, the reason this grabbed people's attention was because it was Hugh Edwards.
Yes.
This very, to all intents and purposes, quite a quiet man, certainly mild-mannered, does all the royal stuff, supremely slick, looked good on the TV, rocked a nice suit, had a good hairstyle.
Yeah.
I mentioned that word, national treasure. That was Hugh Edwards.
Yeah, yeah. And then he became a national disgrace. I think that was the thing. It was the sheer contrast between how we viewed him and how he was. And you're right. I think the other thing was that, he was a bit of an everyman. And that doesn't actually happen that much on the BBC, because we're used to rather, posh, cut-glass speaking kind of presenters. And he was this sort of quite kind of soft, cuddly Welshman. That was his persona.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you found out what had really been going on behind the scenes, it made it all that more scandalous.
Yeah, it really did. And also, I don't know whether this new drama will cover this, but once this was out, we then found out that actually the BBC were kind of slightly aware of some people that had made either complaints or concerns.
Yes, well, the central story, if you like, in this drama revolves around the teenager who was allegedly being paid money for explicit images by Hugh. That particular story was brought to the attention of the BBC by the family of this teenager, and the BBC didn't handle the complaint properly. And that just sums up what is at the heart of the problem with this. And also our understanding is that there was a culture at the BBC of, very hierarchical, and here was someone who was very much at the peak of the food chain, very high up the totem pole, and people were afraid to say things. To us ever thus, it's always been this scenario at the BBC.
It always has. I'm always reminded of the Russell Brand Ross radio Andrew Sachs moment, which, if anything was going to get you fired out of your socks from broadcasting, it would be that, because
Yes.
it was so awful and horrendous. But what made that worse, for those who don't know, this was the phone call when they called Andrew Sachs on air, and Russell Brand had some previous history with Andrew Sachs's granddaughter, and then I can't obviously repeat what was said, but it was all pretty awful stuff to an older guy, you know.
Yes.
And not only did that initially get a free pass, but it was actually listened to before it went out, because it was pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Which kind of shows you how, you know, you're right, you get these big names, they're almost too big to fall.
Yeah, and it's the same. It was the same story with Greg Wallace to some degree. You know, people were sort of saying, you know, that he said and did things. The word inappropriate comes up time and time again. That he said and did inappropriate things, and but of course everyone sort of stands there and says, right, who's going to tackle this? What are we going to say? How are we going to say it? When are we going to say it? You know, but these things are allowed to rumble along, and a small problem becomes a mid-sized problem, becomes a big problem, becomes a long-term problem, and I think this drama will capture how that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say that is it's what angle they come in from, and so there's going to be this sort of backstory of it all. The kind of will it be used also to give the BBC a, you know, I don't mean a kicking in the cheap sense of the word, but will it expose the BBC for their shortcomings, do we think?
I suspect it will, but I don't think they need to go to a great deal of effort to do that. I mean,
you don't really,
you know,
do you? Yeah.
it's there. You just need to read between the lines, and you can see that. I think what's really important in this is the BBC element, there's the Hugh element, but I think there's also the human element, because at the heart of this was a family. And a young person who was vulnerable. And this young person was basically groomed by someone who was much older, who should have known better, who was in a position of authority. That's why the drama is called Power.
Yeah.
You know, and the subtitle is The Downfall of Hugh Edwards. But that word power is central to this. It's about how people in power can abuse that power, and how it's always human beings that suffer.
Yeah, and I'm always fascinated by these stories. I think over in the States, and you know, people like Harvey Weinstein, and I understand. I know that the enormity of his crimes are, you know, perhaps in a different league. Not to underplay anything that Hugh Edwards was found guilty of, but you take the point. The idea that a bloke that only, you know, much like the Queen, thought that every room smelt of fresh paint and carpets were about 4 foot thick, and only ever travelled around in the back of a car, and that car was the size of most people's living rooms, and to lead that opulent, incredible lifestyle for all those years, and he now lives in a 6x8 prison cell.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's, regardless of what we think of, that's haunting, right?
Yes.
I mean, that is.
Yeah.
Properly up there.
Absolutely. And the fall from grace that often accompanies these stories never seems to dissuade the next
person
from coming along. Yeah, but I often wonder, is it the sense of danger? Is it precisely the fear that gives them the thrill? You know, that somewhere deep inside, or maybe not even deep inside, they know they're doing something wrong, and they either don't care, or don't fear the consequences, or get a thrill out of the fear of those consequences. I just don't know. I mean, you and I can't really get inside the minds of those sorts of people.
There was a moment as well, wasn't there, when it all came out about Hugh Edwards, that he was having kind of social media chats with people. He didn't even deny who he was.
No.
There was a point, I think, what one guy said to him, one young guy that he was obviously, flirting with at some level, and the guy said, how was the newsroom today? And he was like, oh, normal day, quite boring. It's like, you're not even denying who you are.
No, but and that was one of the worst elements, if you like, was that it was so brazen.
Yeah.
And I think he fed off. Look, he didn't. The impression given is that he didn't want to just contact people for whatever reason. He wanted to contact people as Hugh Edwards and see the reaction and feed off that.
So that was part of the power,
100%.
hence the reason the power word.
Yeah, it wasn't in spite of who he was. It was because of who he was that he was doing this.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary.
When is this likely to hit the screens?
Well, it could be on next month, the end of next month, or probably in March, I suspect. We're told spring, but that could mean anything. I mean, you've got to remember is that this has only just been filmed. It was filmed during last year, all top secret. And basically it's going to be edited, and then obviously I suspect some lawyers may look at it as well.
I would have thought
But
so.
I think we're looking at either February or more likely March.
Yeah. We look forward to it. Rod, great to see you. Thank you. Rod McPhee, TV editor of The Sun, of course. Great to see him. Back with you. More comments on the way. This is Talk.
These sort of rewirings of the state do need to be done, because I think vast parts of it, the Home Office, I would include in that, the Ministry of Justice, I'd include in that, obviously what the hell is going on Britain's borders, I'd include in that, and the Met Police, I'd include in that. It's these unwieldy, out-of-control organisations that actually any one or two cabinet ministers who change colours and parties and stripes every few years, actually they come in and realise they're not in charge. These are being run by the organisations themselves to the detriment of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, yes. Welcome back, 0344 499 1000. This is Trevor, who's down in London. Trevor, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Well, you were talking about trusting the police. I don't trust the police whatsoever, especially the Metropolitan Police.
Okay.
And the reason why behind this is me and my wife part a company, and my ex-wife then decided to make up allegations against me. The police started to believe her. At one point, they took me to court. I produced evidence to the judge. I defended myself. The judge asked the police to go away and relook at the evidence. The police then basically decided they weren't going to pursue the case against myself. I had a meeting then with the superintendent who was taking the case to court, and I asked him why was he not going to prosecute my ex-wife because of the new evidence that I was able to produce, that she was falsifying statements, she was perverting the course of justice, and they went away and had a look at it. They came back and said, oh, well, the reason why we're not doing it is because of the fact that it's not in the public interest.
Right. Is that the only yardstick for a criminal case?
Well, and I said to them, is it the reason because of she's off a minority My ex-wife was a
don't give us too much information about your ex-wife, but I've got the gist of what you're saying.
She was a non-practicing Muslim, but she was also a professional in the public sector.
Okay.
And I said, is it because the fact is you don't want to shame yourselves because the fact is you've now got it wrong? But at the end of the day, listen, I wouldn't trust him. I'm ex-military. Yeah. I would never trust a policeman ever again after that. And that was a superintendent. I complained to the police ombudsman, and they basically, they said there wasn't enough evidence to push the case forward. I said, how is there not?
Well, you'd think if there was enough evidence, if they thought there was enough evidence to take a case against you that turned out to be false, then some of that same evidence would be used.
Correct. But they decided not to go with it because they said it wasn't in the public's interest.
Wow. That is shocking when you hear that, and I can understand why that would make you more than a tad grumpy. Trevor, thank you very much indeed for that. We were talking about weight loss jabs and the like. This from Tim in Harrogate. It says, can a moment's thought be given to those of us who can't put on weight? I'm 6'1". I eat like a horse. I drink gallons of wine and beer, but I cannot get my weight above 11 stone. I'd love to be pleasantly podgy, says Tim. I know some people would go, I'd kill for that disposition. Yes, Tim, or Tim the pipe cleaner, as he's no doubt known to his friends. There is that thing. Some people just don't put on, the whole Mother Nature thing it's a right confused picture. It's almost like someone's having a right old laugh with the human race. We'll just do weird things in nature. So we'll make you, 6'1" is taller than average. But you can eat anything you like. The bloke next door, who's also 6'1", can eat the same thing, and he weighs, as much as a buffalo. So you have those kind of strange. Nobody can work that out. It's your genetics, isn't it? Your genetics, I say. This one from no name given. Good afternoon, Mr. Collins. In this PC world that we live in, can you call weight loss injections fat jabs? People need to watch what they are eating and exercise more. I play badminton 3 times a week and eat little and often, and I'm 62. Glad to hear it. I always wonder, though, about the fat jabs. They're kind of casually called fat jabs. You can't use the word fat. Who's going to be offended? Well, I suppose fat people might be offended. This is Georgina down in London, the svelte Georgina. What have you got for us, Georgina? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon and a Happy New Year to you, Ian. I'm going to say what I've got to say very quickly. It's about giving the vote to 16-year-olds.
Yes.
It goes to show the desperation of this Labour government when they want to lower the voting age to 16, thus allowing our children to have a say in the most serious issue of running and the safety and the economic stability of our country.
Yep.
Bear in mind, these children are deemed too young by the government to either buy or smoke cigarettes, buy or smoke alcohol, drive a car, or even watch X-rated movies. But when it suits this government for their own benefit, they think it acceptable that they give children the vote. The same children that are so easily manipulated by outside influences like mainstream media and, sadly, some educational institutions. At 16 years of age, most youngsters, with the exception of the very few like young Bob, have no idea of who's in government or what's going on politically in either our country or other countries around the world. And that's okay, because they're still children, quite frankly. I mean, I've got 5 children, the youngest being 17, nearly 18, and I wouldn't put him in charge of a house plant, never mind the smooth running of our country. But now it seems that the government have, in their misplaced wisdom, deemed it fit that they take 2 years off their childhood and now thrust them into the mental turmoil of political arena. Does this mean that they're adult enough to decide upon the running of our country? That they also have adult advantages that before they were denied? I mean, I suggest the government scrap this ridiculous notion. Goodness knows they will have plenty of votes when they give the votes to those who have illegally entered our country. Allow our children to enjoy their childhood, Ian. Let them play on their PlayStation.
Yeah.
Let them play football with their friends. Let them, because adulthood creeps upon every
100% enjoy those moments. Georgina, great call. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, what kind of 16-year-old would sit down swatting over politics and be able to name the cabinet or who the local MP is? Here's Peter Cargill.
Do you know what? I have the most nerdy story ever. It'll take me about 20 seconds to tell you. The night before my GCSE English language exam, aged 15, I was reading What? John Major's autobiography, right?
It's a good autobiography.
The chapter was on when John Major set up the National Lottery.
Yeah.
The question on the unseen paper that you couldn't possibly prepare for because you didn't know what it was the next day was, argue, is the National Lottery a good or bad thing?
Stop it.
That's what happened.
Seriously?
Massive coincidence, yeah.
So your entire career is down to John Major?
It is.
You are one of only 2 people who can claim that, I think.
John Major, me, and maybe Edwina Curry?
I was about to say Norma, but you've gone there. So, yes. So, definitely Edwina.
My favourite detail, when Edwina Curry did the tell-all diary, it was in the Times.
Yep.
And they put it in the second edition because they didn't want people in the first edition to know about it, the other papers to know about it. And the first edition, they put ads for curries.
They did, yes.
Yeah, and the second and later
that
editions,
wasn't a coincidence.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
no,
that wasn't a coincidence. What's happening after 4, Peter?
Well, we're talking about these appalling failures at the Metropolitan Police. Rapists and violent thugs hired. Also, Reform versus Reeves in a racism row. Really interesting what Rachel Reeves has said about the 2-child benefit cap limit and what Nigel Farage has said about that. Also, a possible U-turn on business rates for pubs, which I think is a good thing, but shows yet again that the government didn't know what it was doing the first time round. And